Chapter 1173. Retreat, all retreat. He Lei had no choice but to give the order to retreat. This time, it was not a temporary retreat, but a mad retreat. It was a competition of speed. From Mo Bay City, 20,000 Mabe army and 50,000 Mongolian cavalry charged out. The 20,000 Mabe army was naturally a ranking military force. Their strength was almost enough to reach the second rank. As for the 50,000 Mongolian cavalry beside them, their true strength was probably not even a third-rank cavalry. This was because they were made up of young Mongolian men who wanted to kill the enemy but had not gone through any formal training. Their strength was not as good as the enemy. This made Mo Bay Division Commander Xian Honghai and Deputy Commander Na Ri Song very distressed. Their strength was not as good as the enemy, their strength was not as good as the enemy. They could only rely on the walls of Mo Bay City. This was the natural barrier that blocked the Walla cavalry. They had already made preparations to defend the city, but everything changed because of Yang Chendong's telegram. After Xian Honghai and Na Ri Song saw the contents of the telegram, they were overjoyed and immediately made preparations. Just like when He Lei saw the gates of Mo Bay City open, it was just an illusion. In reality, everyone in the city was under control. The people who appeared in front of them were just normal Mo Bay soldiers in disguise. This was also the reason why He Lei's spies were able to light up the fireworks as soon as they entered the city. It was all because in the controlled North Desert City, there would not be any unfamiliar faces at all. As soon as the scout sent by He Lei entered the city where they could not see, he was caught by Xian Honghai and the others. Under the condition that one of his arms was cut off, he learned of his mission. This caused the smoke to rise, which completely dispelled He Lei's last doubts. The horse trap had been dug long ago. After countless changes, Xian Honghai and Na Ri Song came to the conclusion that the best time to attack was when the enemy turned around and retreated. In other words, if He Lei had been willing to let the army continue to charge forward, the horse trap would have eventually been filled. At that time, Xian Honghai and the others would have had no choice but to face the Walla army head-on. No one could say for sure whether they would have won or lost. Fortunately, He Lei was a general who loved his soldiers and made a decision that was beneficial to the Mabe army. Because of this, he was hunted down. Chase, don't stop, and don't give them any chance to fight back. Xian Honghai's shout reached the ears of all the cavalrymen through the messenger's roar. The pursuit began. They did their best to catch up, not giving He Lei a chance to stop his horse and turn around. No matter how strong a cavalry unit was, if they were not given the opportunity and distance to charge, they would not be able to display their advantage. Under the pursuit, the Walla cavalry could not even display 30% of their usual strength. Occasionally, some cavalrymen who were about to be caught up tried to fight back, but in the end, because there were too few of them, their strength was too weak, and they were drowned by the Mabe and Mongolian cavalrymen and died regretfully. He Lei, who was running among the troops, would occasionally look back. When he saw his soldiers being caught up and killed by the enemy cavalry, he was naturally furious. But he knew very well that there was nothing he could do. He had lost the initiative, and the army was in the process of fleeing. He had no way to fight back. Even if he gave the order, or even if he led his troops to charge back, it would be a suicide mission. There was no better way. He could only run, and hope that they could use their better horsemanship to escape the enemy's pursuit. At that time, he would gather his main force and charge back. He could already see that the Mabe army and Mongolian troops chasing him were not that strong, and were far inferior to the elite Walla cavalry. If they were to fight head-on, he had at least an 80% chance of winning. One side ran, the other side chased, and the distance of 100 miles was covered in a few hours. With the passage of time, the distance between the two sides continued to widen. It was already difficult for the cavalrymen to catch up to the enemy and be hacked to death by a flurry of blades. He Lei breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, he calculated the distance between the two sides. Once he felt that the distance was far enough, and he could launch a counterattack, he would be the first to stop his horse. That would be the time for him to teach the enemy a lesson. He was still waiting for an opportunity, but how could he know that the opportunity did not exist for him at all? This was because when they had run around 120 li and were about to open up enough distance to counterattack, they had already arrived at a place 50 li away from the Three Peaks mountain. Just as they reached the side of the mountain, arrows were shot out, hitting the vanguard of the cavalry. For a moment, the arrows fell like rain, and the horses lost their footing. The sudden attack caught the Walla army off guard. After losing thousands of cavalry, even more cavalry rushed out of the forest, holding bright 5-star flags. The leader was the Far Eastern Army's commander, Chen Bo. When he and his army passed by the Three Peaks mountain, Chen Bo had already led the 40,000 cavalry to gather here. However, he did not immediately charge out. Instead, he followed Yang Chendong's instructions and waited for the enemy to be defeated so that he could intercept them on the way back. Everything was as Yang Chendong had expected. He had been tricked and was defeated. When they arrived at the foot of the Three Peaks mountain, it was time for Chen Bo to beat a drowning dog. The sudden appearance of the 40,000 cavalry carrying the 5-star army's flag was like a heavy hammer to the chest, dealing a heavy blow to the Walla cavalry. If it was said that they had the advantage of numbers before, then with the appearance of the Far Eastern Army, the difference in numbers between the two sides had undergone a qualitative change. Out of the 95,000 cavalrymen, they had lost at least 10,000 during their escape. In addition to the surprise attack by the Far East Army, they had lost another 5,000 cavalrymen, leaving them with less than 80,000 soldiers. Naturally, there was a gap between them and the 5-star Corps, which had 110,000 soldiers. Their numbers were inferior, and they had fallen into the enemy's trap. At this moment, he felt like he could not cry out to the heavens. At this moment, any action of fighting would only be sending them to their deaths. The only thing they could do now was to escape, and to continuously escape. Retreat, don't continue fighting, retreat. He's heart was dripping blood as he shouted loudly. His personal guards were constantly blowing the bugle horn to retreat. After losing more than 10,000 riders, the Walla cavalry finally broke out of the encirclement and continued to flee to the east. Chase. The two generals, Xin Honghai and Chen Bo, did not hesitate at all and decisively gave the order to continue the chase. For them, the battle had just begun. With Chen Bo's Far Eastern Army blocking the way, the distance between the two sides was once again shortened. The Walla cavalry was beaten until they were scared witless. When they could finally see the 70,000 Baiming army infantry led by Shi Wanshan, there were less than 70,000 cavalry left. From afar, he saw many figures in front of him. He saw the Baiming dragon flag raised high, and he also saw the 5,000 Walla cavalry guarding the Baiming dragon flag. The heavens are helping me. He laughed loudly. When he saw the Baiming army infantry, he seemed to see a new hope. With the help of these infantry, it was enough to buffer the enemy. That way, he would have the opportunity to reorganize his army and launch a counterattack. He swore that this time, he would chase down the 5-star army cavalry and flatten North Desert City. He would even massacre the entire city. He wanted to tell everyone what the consequences of angering the Walla cavalry were. Quick, prepare the bows and arrows. Stop the 5-star army cavalry. He kept increasing the speed of his horse. Although his mount was almost at its limit, he did not feel the slightest bit of heartache. He just wanted to be one step ahead and tell the Baiming army to get ready. Then he would launch a full counterattack. As expected of one of the 4 generals chosen by Yes Hen, He's horse was extremely fast. He was at least 30 meters ahead of the messenger and rushed to the front of the Baiming army. Following these shouts, countless soldiers of the Baiming army raised the bows in their hands. A murderous aura came from them. Facing the scene of tens of thousands of cavalry waiting to be shot, he was not only not afraid, but also excited. These were all his allies, his friends. Next, he just needed to wait for the arrows to pass and disrupt the enemy's pursuit formation. Then, it would be time for them to launch a full counterattack. He still had a smile on his face. He did not notice that a general of the Baiming army was aiming a strong bow at him. This person was General Ancient River. He had fought with the Walla cavalry countless times. He did not know how many soldiers and trusted generals had died in their hands. This hatred was not something that could be erased by the emperor's decree or by the fact that both sides were allies. Previously, he was thinking about the big picture. Even if he wanted to, he could not do anything excessive. But now, he was a member of the 5-star army. It was reasonable for him to make a move now. At the same time, it was also a great achievement. The arrow kept moving, aiming at Helay's chest, who had stopped his horse with a smile on his face. Then, his left hand that was holding the arrow's tail loosened. The arrow with the iron tip made a sound as it pierced through the air and flew towards Helay's chest. Ha ha ha. Ugh. While he was still laughing and imagining the scene of victory in his mind, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. Then, before he could react, he felt a pain in his chest. The arrow's tail was still shaking as it pierced through his chest. This was precisely the arrow shot by Gu He. It hit the target, the unguarded Helay's chest. Helay had never thought that this would be the result. He lowered his head and saw the red blood coming out of his chest. Helay used all his strength to point at the Baiming army. With a plop, he fell off his horse. One of the 4 generals that Yeshen valued the most, Helay, closed his eyes and followed in the footsteps of Teng Shu and Mu Tua. Helay died like this in front of all the Walla cavalry. This scene shocked them so much that many soldiers could not help but stop. They did not even realize that they were surrounded by the Far Eastern Army, Mabe Army, and Mongolian Army. Chapter 1174. There were also some cavalrymen who quickly recovered from their shock. The first thing they did was to run away. The Baiming army had rebelled. They had actually joined forces with the 5-star army to deal with the Walla army. This news must be reported to Yeshen, otherwise they would suffer a great loss. But how could it be so easy to escape at this moment? Not to mention the 70,000 infantrymen of Baiming in front of them and the 110,000 5-star army cavalrymen behind them. The 5,000 Walla cavalrymen that were originally in charge of guarding the Baiming army had already been taken down by Shi Wanshan and the others. Now these cavalrymen were replaced by the Baiming army. Stop them, don't let a single one of them escape. Also, don't spread the news that Baiming and the 5-star army have joined forces. General Shi Wanshan, who was riding on a horse, took off the Vala cavalry uniform he was using to disguise himself as he shouted loudly. Under Shi Wanshan's command, such shouts could be heard everywhere on the battlefield. It could be said that everyone knew that Baiming had joined forces with the 5-star army. All of this made Chen Bo, Xin Honghai, and the others very anxious. Quick, seal the battlefield, don't let a single enemy escape. If anyone doesn't surrender, kill them. After the military order was given, no matter if it was the Far Eastern Army, the Mabe Army, or the Mongolian cavalrymen, they began to move faster and faster. If any Walla cavalry refused to surrender, they would be killed without mercy. The entire battlefield was suddenly filled with rivers of blood. The already dark green grassland was covered with a layer of bright red. From afar, it was very eye-catching and dazzling. Arrows flew, sabers danced, weapons collided, people flew and horses fell. The so-called most precious life was clearly worthless at this moment. One by one, the resisting Walla cavalry were overturned and turned into fertilizer for the grassland, forever buried here. This battle lasted until noon of the second day. The sun hung high in the sky. Only then did the dust settle and the clamor slowly die down. The ground was covered with the corpses of the dead Walla cavalry, as well as the flags that they were once proud of. But at this moment, those flags were already in tatters, as if they were telling the cruelty and difficulty of this battle. There were a total of 100,000 Walla cavalrymen. Nearly 30,000 of them were killed and 70,000 were captured. Unfortunately, hundreds of cavalrymen took advantage of the night to escape. When this result was reported to General Chen Bo, Xianxia, and Shi Wanshan, they couldn't help but look at each other and laughed. Hundreds of cavalrymen ran away. I believe this news will definitely reach Yeshen's ears. Xianxia thought of the military order issued by Yang Chendong. At first, he felt a little embarrassed. After all, 100,000 Walla cavalry were coming. It was very difficult to defeat them, let alone kill them all and spread the news. But now, it seemed that the mission was completed just like that. Although his side also paid a certain price in this battle, for example, thousands of Mongolian cavalrymen died, and more than 5,000 Baiming cavalrymen died. But compared to the results of the battle, there was no doubt that it was a great victory. Definitely. Okay, next, the task of cleaning the battlefield will be handed over to General Shi. Commander Xian, we still have to hurry to the beginning city. Chen Bo's face also showed a satisfied smile. But he didn't forget that this was only half of the mission. The most important step in this battle was to meet the beginning city. Well said. Generals, take care. Shi Wanshan also knew that it was impossible for his infantry to maintain the same speed as the cavalrymen. But just as Shi Wanshan's voice fell, a rider came from not far away. The rider was dressed in silver armor. It was Shi Wanshan's deputy, Ancient River. Generals, I also want to go to the battlefield with you to kill the enemy, but please help me. Ancient River, don't make trouble, Shi Wanshan shouted when he saw that Ancient River wanted to interfere. General, I'm not making trouble. This time, we seized a lot of Walla cavalry's horses. I have just mobilized 10,000 soldiers. As long as they are given horses, they are willing to kill the enemy with me. General, how many small shoes did those people put on us before? Now is the time for us to take revenge. Gu, he said with his eyes wide open, as if he was unwilling to admit defeat. Seeing that Ancient River was determined, Chen Bo looked at him with appreciation. Not bad, you are a tiger general. I think you can do it. Come, bring me a commander's cloak. The bodyguard immediately found a large black cloak, and Chen Bo personally handed it to Ancient River. General Ancient, to be able to wear a cloak of this level, you are at least a commander in the 5-star army. I believe you will not disgrace it. Thank you. Ancient River was excited. He stretched out his hands and took it. With a shake of his hands, the cloak spread with the wind and hung on his body. Then he looked at Shi Wanshan with excitement and said, General, do you think I am awe-inspiring? Awe-inspiring. Looking at Ancient River's attire, Shi Wanshan knew that he could not stop him. In addition, Commander Chen Bo also expressed his opinion, so he could not stop him. He rode his horse forward and patted Ancient River's shoulder, saying, Be careful. Hee, to be able to fight together with the 5-star army is my fortune. General, don't worry, the news of victory will come soon. Ha ha ha. Gu, he laughed heartily as he turned around and left. He wanted to tell this good news to his 10,000 cavalry brothers. Chen Bo, Xianxia, and the others also left very quickly. Looking at the back view of over 100,000 cavalry soldiers leaving, Ning Wenfeng walked to Shi Wanshan's side and said, General Ancient River is leading the vanguard for us. This is a good thing for us. Of course, I know that he wants to gain more battle merits so that we can have more room for improvement after joining the 5-star army. I also know that ever since we paid 300,000 taels of silver for him, he has been under a lot of psychological pressure. However, there are always casualties in a war. I just hope that he can come back safely. Shi Wanshan sighed and said. Ning Wenfeng nodded heavily. We have been through many trials and tribulations. We have to believe in Brother Ancient River. He will definitely be fine. In the Baiming army's barracks at the foot of the origin city. Under the continuous siege, not only was the origin city not broken, but it seemed to be more solid. At least the 5-star army in the city resisted more than before. This rather unusual action made many people very surprised, and also had a feeling of puzzlement. Su Dei, like many generals, often showed a thoughtful expression. However, everyone didn't know that his thoughts were different from everyone else. He had been thinking about how to complete the task given by Yang Chendong and how to instigate the relationship between the Baiming army and the Walla army. As usual, he walked out of his tent. Unlike some people who like to think about things behind closed doors, Su Dei liked to look around and keep walking to find the answer to the question. Perhaps no one in the entire barracks knew better than him what happened in the grassland of the North Desert 3 days ago. Who would have thought that 100,000 Walla cavalry would be defeated like this? In the end, only a few hundred of them escaped. This would be a big earthquake and completely tear apart the alliance between the Baiming army and the Wara army. This was undoubtedly something that the 5-star army hoped to see. Now, what he needed to do was to not give the two sides a chance to argue. Thinking and walking, he unconsciously came to the junction between the Baiming army and the Wara army. What he saw was the Walla cavalry cooking. The smell of meat was still far away, but it had already drifted over. When the smell entered his nose, Su Dei instinctively twitched his nose. Then an idea came, which made the corners of his mouth curl up slightly. And on the same night, the important place where the Baiming army stored grain and fodder suddenly caught fire. Although it didn't involve too much grain because of the timely rescue, it still scared the admiral, Marquis Wuxia Xianxia. The grain was sufficient, but it was so laborious to attack the first city. He really didn't dare to imagine how the war would go on without grain and fodder. Therefore, in the general tent, after he severely punished the grain officer 50 times, he ordered people to investigate the matter to see what caused the fire. Xianxia even had a thought. Could the fire be set by the 5-star army? The general was angry, and the efficiency of the people under him was much faster. Just at dawn the next day, the general sent to investigate reported that someone saw 2 Walla soldiers appear around the grain storage last night. This news made Xianxia's face change greatly. Is the news reliable? Did the 2 people catch them? Reporting back to Marquis, no. You also know that we are allies now. Besides, it was dark at that time, and I didn't see their faces clearly. I only recognized them as Walla soldiers from their clothes. The general in charge of the investigation bowed his head and answered. But he would never have thought that the 2 shadows were just Su Dei and his most trusted soldiers in disguise. This was also the simplest way that Su Dei thought of to drive a wedge between the 2 armies. Xianxia didn't know this. What he now learned was that Walla soldiers wanted to set fire to his grain and fodder. What did they want to do? Did they want to fall out with him? Come, immediately invite General Fong and General Cen. This was a matter of great importance, and it was far from what he could decide alone. He now needed to find someone to discuss what to do if this matter was true. After a while, Liaodong General Fong Dingshan and Datong Vice Chief Tsin Guang appeared in the general tent. The 2 of them learned the truth of the matter from Xianxia. No way, we are allies now. Tsin Guang exclaimed after hearing the news. Obviously, he never thought of this result. Allies? That's only for now. Not in the past or in the future. Fong Dingshan looked indifferent and didn't seem to be surprised. Chapter 1175. General Fong, what do you mean? Xianxia looked at Fong Dingshan's expression and asked in a puzzled tone, but his expression was natural. It was obvious that he was thinking the same thing. What else? If it weren't for the 5-star army, we would have been mortal enemies with the Walla cavalry. The reason why we joined forces is because the current 5-star army is easier to bully. Once they are eliminated, I'm afraid that our cooperation will end. It's inevitable that we will fall out. After Fang Dingshan said this, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Shi Heng and Sun Guang. He didn't believe that these two people didn't think of this. In fact, Shi Heng had already received the decree of the Daizong Emperor. He could join forces with the Wara army, but it was only a limited alliance. He had to be prepared to fall out with them at any time. After all, when it came to hatred, the hatred between the two sides was far greater than the hatred between Baiming and Yang Chendong. In the past, the Wara army used to harvest grain at the border of the Great Ming grassland. Now that the Great Ming dynasty was divided into the north and the south, they were the initiators. Not long ago, Fang Dingshan led 70,000 Liaodong cavalry to harvest grain in the Wara army's territory, killing their people and stealing their livestock. It was impossible to say that there was no hatred in everyone's heart. Shi Heng was naturally very clear about these things. He knew that the hatred between the two sides was already irreconcilable, but there was one thing he couldn't figure out. Why did the Wara army choose to attack them at this time? Did they want to join forces to deal with the 5-star army? Shi Heng raised the question in his heart and then looked at Fang Dingshan, wanting to see what the other party thought. Marquis, don't look at me. The reason why they did this is probably because they think that we can't take down the first city. Since that's the case, our allied forces will have to disperse sooner or later. If they can cause us some trouble at this time, that's naturally good. By the way, Marquis, please don't forget that the Shaojing city and Jingzhou city that we're occupying used to belong to the Tile tribe. Speaking of this matter, Fang Dingshan did not even hesitate. It was clear that he was not optimistic about this alliance. This had a lot to do with Fang Dingshan's personality. He was originally a very arrogant person. In his eyes, only Baiming was orthodox. The 5-star army, the World Wara, and even the Southern Ming dynasty would all submit to Baiming soon. His mission was to conquer them, defeat them, and establish an immortal achievement. With such thoughts in mind, he had long regarded everyone as his enemy. In that case, it would be normal for the enemy to do anything to harm him. There was nothing strange or suspicious about it. If these thoughts were known by Su Dei, he would be very happy. This proved that his plan to sow discord had succeeded. You're right. It seems that we have to be careful of them. By the way, Generalson, how confident are you in taking down the first city? Shi Heng nodded in agreement. What Fang Dingshan said was roughly the same as what he thought. However, there was one difference. In his eyes, the 5-star army was a bigger enemy. No matter how strong the World Wara was, they were only able to move freely on the grassland. In contrast, Bugnam of Gojoseon had the ability to penetrate the hinterland of Baiming. This was what he needed to guard against the most. When he thought of Bugnam of Gojoseon, it reminded him of the first city. He wanted to know how confident he was in taking down the first city. It should be soon. This time, Sun Guang was not as confident as before. It was not because of anything else. It was because the difficulty of attacking the city had increased over the past few days. The 5-star army that was guarding the city seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They began to regain their vitality and were not as easy to deal with as they were in the beginning. However, with the advantage of besieging the city, he firmly believed that the other party would not be able to hold on for long. Therefore, it was certain that they would be able to take down the city, provided that they had enough time. Then let's speed up. Shi Heng did not intend to urge Sun Guang. These days, the momentum of the siege was still very fierce. As the commander, he knew very well in his heart. Of course, he did not know that there was not much time left for him. By the way, General Fang, what do you think we should do next against the World Wara? Shi Heng did not forget the purpose of asking the two of them to discuss this matter. What else can we do? We'll just have to deal with whatever comes our way. In the future, we will increase the number of soldiers guarding the provisions. In addition, I will also send people to keep an eye on them." Fang Dingshan said with a relaxed expression. If the other party still had 150,000 cavalrymen, he would be nervous. But now, there were only 50,000 of them, which was even less than him. He was really not afraid. This was also because the emperor did not give an order. Otherwise, he would have dared to kill these people. Fang Dingshan said it so casually that Shi Heng also breathed a sigh of relief. This was the advantage of having strong soldiers. When dealing with things, they would have a lot more confidence. Well, then we have to pay attention to the world war's every move at all times. Of course, the main thing is to attack the city. As long as we take down the first city, even if they have other ideas, they will have to hold back. When we deal with the 5-star army, it will be time to go back and deal with them. Generalson, please pay attention to this point. After going around in circles, they finally returned to the problem of how to take down the first city. Yes, I will do my best. But now, we are a little short of troops. Can we see if we can transfer some from the rear? Sun Guang asked tentatively. These days, although the 5-star army that was guarding the city was under great pressure, they also suffered a lot of losses. The number of wounded had exceeded 30,000, and the other soldiers were also exhausted. If they could get a fresh army to join them now, then they would have a greater chance of taking down the city. Shi Heng was the military commander personally appointed by the emperor. He was in charge of all the military affairs at the front line. Only he had the final say on things like transferring troops. After hearing Sun Guang's request, he asked very seriously, "General Sun, how many more troops do you need? Can you guarantee that you can take down the first city?" Hearing that there was hope, Sun Guang said with some excitement, "There is no problem in taking down the first city. I can feel that the enemy's strength has been greatly reduced. Now, it is just a little bit away. If Marquis can give me an additional 100,000 troops, then I am confident that I can take down the city within 5 days. If it is not possible, I am willing to offer my head." This was equivalent to giving a military order. If there were really 100,000 fresh troops, they could attack from the 4 city gates regardless of day or night. It was really possible to take down the city in 5 days. Oh? So confident? That's good. Marquis will immediately give the order to transfer troops. Shi Heng was also very excited when he heard this. Although the transfer of 100,000 infantrymen was not part of the plan, it would be a great achievement if they could take down the first city. Not only would he be able to report to the emperor, but he would also be able to obtain a great achievement. "Thank you, Ho Yi." Hearing that the matter was approved, Sun Guang was also very excited. The meeting ended. Shi Heng found his messenger and took out the tiger troop talisman. He asked them to go to Tulu City, Sanbulachuan City, Shajing City, and Jingzhou City to transfer troops. Tulu City was the fortress of the rear base of the Baiming army. There were originally 50,000 soldiers there. They were responsible for guarding the provisions, and if there were any changes, they would be reinforcements. When Shi Heng gave the order, 40,000 of the 50,000 soldiers were transferred. Sanbulachuan City had fewer soldiers. There were only 30,000 soldiers guarding the city. Among them, there were 10,000 wounded soldiers who had retreated from the front line. Shi Heng gave the order, and 20,000 healthy soldiers were transferred away, leaving only 10,000 injured soldiers behind. If there were no external forces, there wouldn't be any problems. There were 60,000 soldiers out of 100,000. The last 40,000 soldiers could only be sent to Shajing City and Jingzhou City. This made it difficult for Rong Shao, who was in charge here. As a businessman, he knew that if he wanted to expand his business, he could not do without his own people in the imperial court. How could he be considered one of his own people? Of course, it was not as good as being an official himself. Once he became a pillar of the country, who would dare to cause trouble for him in the future? After a discussion with the Rong family, Rong Shao finally gave Shi Heng 200,000 taels of silver. In addition to his contribution in successfully instigating the rebellion of the two cities, he was promoted to general of the two cities. He became Shi Heng's favorite person. When Shi Heng gave the order, Rong Shao knew that his chance to perform had come. He called Su Yuan over and said with a troubled expression, "The opportunity is here. However, when we negotiated with the spirit-severing army, we said that they wouldn't go against the 5-star army. What do you think we should do?" This. Su Yuanjiang furrowed his brows. After following Shabi for such a long time, he knew the general's temper. He was a man of his word. Based on how much Yang Chendong valued him, even without the agreement, Yang Chendong probably wouldn't send troops out due to guilt, let alone with the agreement in hand. However, Su Yuan knew that Rong Shao didn't call him over to see him shake his head. Rong Shao wanted him to come up with a plan. Well, the Han people have a saying, times are different now. The situation is different, so the original agreement will have to be changed. What's more, he's been drinking wine every day, and with Wu Xiaoyi's death, the other 3 teachers have a lot of opinions about him. I think it's better to bypass him and talk to the teachers directly. Is that okay? Rong Shao's eyes lit up when he heard that. Why not? How about this, I will talk to the 3 teachers first. However, I would like to ask Lord Rong to remove the people who are monitoring the 3 division masters, as well as those who are responsible for sowing discord. Since we are here to talk, we must show our sincerity. Su Yuan thought for a moment and proposed his idea. That's not a problem. Rong Shao agreed. He had no other choice. Although the method of sowing discord had some effect now, as long as he was given time, he was confident that he could take over the military power of the 3 division commanders. Then, he could find a reason to arrest them. However, with Shi Heng's order and a short 3 days, he did not have the patience to wait for the next batch of soldiers. Chapter 1176. Su Yuan left Rong Shao's place and went straight to the residence of Kong Ji, the commander of the new 2nd Army's 1st Cavalry Division in Shajing City. In the Kong residence, Kong Ji was very surprised when he found out that Su Yuan was outside the residence and wanted to see him. He couldn't figure out why the other party wanted to see him at this time. Well, since he's here, I'll invite him in. Kong Ji and Su Yuan sat opposite each other in the living room of the residence. The other bodyguards were all removed from the living room. This was Su Yuan's request. After all, he was here to ask for help. Not only would he lose face if he said some soft words in front of so many people, he was also afraid that he would be put on the spot. Without anyone else around, Su Yuan didn't care about his reputation and directly made his request. "Mr. Kong, I'm sorry for offending you before. It wasn't my idea to send people to monitor your residence. And those people who tried to sow discord in the division weren't sent by me either. I've already protested to Rong Shao about this matter. He has already promised that these people will all be recalled. I hope that this matter won't affect our friendship." Kong Ji was shocked that Su Yuan was so humble right from the start. It wasn't a big deal to monitor his own people, and he didn't intend to do anything when the time wasn't right. But those people who tried to sow discord really gave him a headache. They spread unfavorable words about him everywhere in the division. At first, it was fine. With his usual character, no one believed those words. But some things were afraid of being repeated. If he said too much, it was inevitable that people would believe him. Over time, there were people in the division who started to have ulterior motives. It was just that they didn't have enough evidence. In addition, this matter was instigated by Rong Shao. Even if he wanted to make a move, he didn't have the right opportunity. Originally, he thought that if this continued, he wouldn't be able to regain the command power when he really needed to use the army one day. He didn't expect that Su Yuan would solve all these problems and worries. This was an unexpected surprise. Of course, since he did such a big thing for him, he must have a favor to ask of him. Kong Ji didn't believe that a pie would fall from the sky. So although he was happy, he pretended to be calm and said, "Mr. Su, we're not outsiders. Just tell me, what price do you need me to pay?" "Mr. Kong, you're really straightforward. It's like this. The military operation to attack the first city is going smoothly, and it looks like we will be able to take it in a few days. Considering the problem of maintaining the safety of that place in the future, Admiral Shiheng ordered our new Second Army to send 20,000 soldiers to assist. The mission given was to send 40,000 soldiers. Rong Shao had 20,000 soldiers. Now that there were only 20,000 soldiers left, he had to rely on the new Second Army. With the current strength of the new Second Army, there were a total of 4 divisions. If each division could send 5,000 soldiers, then the number would be enough. When he heard that the beginning city would be conquered in a few days, Kong Ji's heart started to beat more frequently and faster. If the beginning city was really conquered, then when would he be able to return to the 5-star army? Fortunately, Su Yuan's next words made Kong Ji heave a sigh of relief. At the same time, he also saw the other party's real intention. Bai Ming did not have enough soldiers at the front line. They must have fallen into a difficult situation when attacking the beginning city. Otherwise, they would not have come to beg him. After knowing the other party's purpose, Kong Ji felt relieved and started to pick up his gun. "Mr. Su, I'm sure you still remember the agreement that the military commander signed with you. The first clause is that we can't be enemies with the 5-star army anymore. We were forced to surrender. We've already let down Bugnam of Gojoseon. How can we go against our conscience and be enemies with them? We really can't do such a thing." Su Yuan revealed an expression that said, "as expected." He knew that the other party would say this. Then, he smiled and said, "Mr. Kong, you've misunderstood. Didn't I say just now? These troops are not going to fight with the 5-star army. They are only responsible for the defense of the beginning city in the future. You also know that even if there is no 5-star army on the grassland, there is still the Walla cavalry and the Mongolian cavalry from various tribes. They are not so easy to deal with. The beginning city is such a big city in front of us. If we don't have enough troops to defend it, we will face the danger of losing it at any time." The reason given by Su Yuan was very suitable. Kong Ji could not find a reason to refute it. However, their division only had more than 8,000 people. If 5,000 people were transferred away all of a sudden, their strength would be reduced by more than half. This was not what he wanted to see. It was certainly a good thing to be able to remove the people who were monitoring him and spreading rumors in the army. However, how to agree to the other party's request without being heartbroken was what Kong Ji needed to consider. He did not speak for a long time. He looked at Su Yuan and asked anxiously, "Mr. Kong, say something. Sir Rong Shao is still waiting for the news." "Well, it's really impossible to transfer 5,000 people from a division." Kong Ji had a rough idea in his mind in a short period of time. He finally spoke. As soon as he spoke, Su Yuan was immediately unhappy. "Mr. Kong, what do you mean? I just said that we are not going to be enemies with the 5-star army." Wait, Mr. Su, wait for me to finish. You just said that these troops are not rushing to the beginning city to be enemies with the 5-star army. They are responsible for defending the city after taking it down. If that's the case, what do you think about this? I'll transfer 2,000 people from the division to you. Then, you'll recruit 3,000 able-bodied men from the city as soldiers. In this way, won't you make up 5,000 people? The advantage of doing this is that it won't affect the combat ability of our new Second Army. It can also help you complete the mission. Isn't it the best of both worlds? Besides, it's just a mission to defend the city. It's not difficult. Even if they haven't undergone any training, they can still do it well. What do you think? Kong Ji came up with a way to get the best of both worlds. He needed to ensure the combat ability of a division. The organization could be incomplete, but they could be pulled and fought when there was a mission. Therefore, he had no choice but to come up with this plan. Originally, Su Yuan wanted to say something. However, when he heard this method, his attitude became a little hesitant. Since he did not reject it immediately, there was a way. Kong Ji added fuel to the fire and said, "Mr. Su, why does Baiming value us so much? Isn't it because our army has a certain level of combat ability? If we don't have this characteristic, who will still value us? By that time, it'll be time to get rid of the donkey after it has outlived its usefulness. If that's the case, we won't have a good ending. I'm sure Mr. Su won't have a good time either. Factions are the most important thing in the army. A good man has 3 factions." Kong Ji said these words from Su Yuan's perspective. This made Su Yuan, who was originally hesitant, finally make up his mind. "Not bad. Mr. Kong, you're indeed a talented general with both wisdom and courage. You're right. How about this, I'll go talk to Mr. Rongshao now. Oh, by the way, about the 2,000 people that the 1st Cavalry Division will send out, please make early preparations." Sure. I'll make the arrangements now." Kong Ji thought about how some people in the division were dissatisfied with him. Some of them were simply spreading rumors. He didn't know how to deal with these people. Now that there was an opportunity, it would be good to get rid of them so that he could better control the troops. Su Yuan left in a hurry. He did not know how he told Rongshao, but the matter was settled. Then, the recruitment of soldiers in the 2 cities began. They were not working for the 5-star army, which was for the people. The people were not very enthusiastic about joining the army. In the end, there was no other way. The recruitment became a recruitment of able-bodied men. Who asked Shiheng to be so anxious? Rongshao, who wanted to show off, had to do things well. Not only that, he also decided to personally send 40,000 troops to Beginning City to curry favor with Shiheng. Under Beginning City. The siege was still ongoing. Since the military order was made in front of Shiheng and Fang Dingshan, under the command of Guang, the attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Several times, their soldiers rushed up the city tower. Although they were eventually suppressed, at least they saw the dawn of victory. The siege was very lively. The Wara war camp under the city was unusually quiet. This kind of siege warfare was not suitable for cavalry. They had been under the city for a long time, and some of the cavalry were even lazy. But all of this changed with the return of a few Wala cavalry. They were the Wala warriors who followed General He Lei to the battle. They were lucky enough to escape. Naturally, they had to return to the camp and report everything they saw and experienced to their leader. In fact, they were not the only ones who returned. Not far from the camp, there were hundreds of cavalry waiting there. Everyone heard Shi Wanshan's shout and knew that Baiming had joined forces with the 5-star army. They were worried that once they returned, they would alert the enemy, so they sent a few representatives back to the camp. In the leader's tent, Yeshen received these deserters. After learning that He Lei died in battle and only a few hundred of the cavalry escaped, he was so angry that he flipped the desk in front of him and said angrily, "You said that the reason why we lost was because the Baiming army stabbed us in the back, right?" "Yes, leader. We saw it with our own eyes and experienced it personally. Otherwise, with our fast horses, no matter how many enemies there are, they can't stop us." Several soldiers who escaped knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Good. What a good Baiming army. I trusted them so much, but they dared to play tricks behind our backs. I'm going to find Shiheng and ask him for an explanation. Yeshen could not suppress his anger and was about to leave the tent. "You can't." A figure blocked his way, and then that person knelt on the ground. "Leader, you can't do that. Baiming and the 5-star army have joined forces. If we go to them now, not only will it not have the slightest effect, but it will also alert them. If we don't do it well, they will do harm to our leader. The person who spoke was the deputy general that Yeshen had just promoted, Chao Lu. In Mongolian, it meant stone. Chapter 1177. This person was very burly and had good skills. More importantly, he was not only a boorish man, but he also had his own ideas when he encountered problems. Ever since he was discovered by Yeshen, he was promoted to be a deputy general by his side, in charge of his own safety. Sometimes, he would even lead troops to become a general. When Chao Lu blocked the way, Yeshen wanted to kick him away out of anger. However, when he heard that the Baiming army would be a threat to his safety, he quickly calmed down. Whether it was the battle with Tuatua Buhua or the battle with the 5-star army, although he had failed many times, he still lived until now because of his carefulness. For such a person, if you asked him to take risks, he would never do such a stupid thing. Since he could not meet Shiheng, there were some things that he could not figure out what was going on. He could not help but feel a little unwilling. He suppressed his anger and asked Chao Lu, "Let me ask you, do you think the Baiming army and the 5-star army have really joined forces?" "This. I don't know, but I don't think so." "If that's the case, why are they attacking the beginning city so fiercely? Moreover, they did not ask for our help from the beginning to the end. This makes no sense." Chao Lu shook his head. "That's right, that's what I think as well. If the Baiming army and the 5-star army have really joined forces, what they should do is to besiege us instead of acting for us. Besides, their deaths and injuries are real. I don't believe that they will betray us." Yeshen nodded and agreed with Chao Lu's words. Although he was puzzled, when he turned around and saw the few cavalry warriors kneeling on the ground, he became suspicious again. He knew these people, and 2 of them were He Lei's bodyguards. They would never lie to him. Then who was telling the truth? To be able to become the leader of the Wara, Yeshen was indeed smart. He quickly thought of a way. He said to Chao Lu beside him, Go to Shiheng's tent. Don't tell him anything else. Just tell him that I have caught a cold and am sick. Ask him to come and see me." When he heard that he was going to Shiheng's tent, Chao Lu's heart skipped a beat. He thought that the leader wanted him to question the other party. However, when he heard that it was just a message, he immediately felt relieved. "Leader, you mean to bring Shiheng to our camp and then you can question him yourself? Not bad." He nodded his head in satisfaction. He was happy for Chao Lu's intelligence. At the same time, he said, "I want to ask him myself. What's going on? If this is really a trap set by the 5-star army, then he needs to give me an explanation and give me enough compensation. 100,000 elite cavalrymen, just thinking about it makes my heart ache." After years of constant battles, Yeshen's strength had been greatly reduced. Now, he only had 50,000 cavalrymen with him and 80,000 cavalrymen in the Hanoi headquarters. In total, he only had 130,000 cavalrymen left. This time, he had lost nearly half of his forces. Anyone would be heartbroken. After knowing Yeshen's intention, Chao Lu knew what to do. He agreed and left the tent. In view of the fact that the provisions were almost burned, Shiheng increased the surveillance of the Walla army camp. When a few cavalrymen suddenly entered the Walla army camp, he became alert. Although he didn't know where these cavalrymen came from or what they wanted to do, he instinctively became vigilant. At this moment, Chao Lu came. Using Yeshen's illness as an excuse, he asked Shiheng to go to the Walla army to discuss the next step of the battle plan. "Oh, Leader Yeshen is sick. Is there anything wrong?" "Sigh, how could such a strong body get sick just like that? How about this, I'll immediately send people to bring a skilled doctor. As for Marquis, he's really busy with military affairs, so he won't go. Just like how Yeshen didn't dare to come to his tent, Shiheng was also afraid of death. Who knows if he's really sick, or if he's just trying to trick me to go over and harm me. Not only did Shiheng not go, but he also wanted to send a doctor with him. Chao Lu, who was afraid of being exposed, of course didn't agree. He could only say that the leader's illness wasn't serious. The Walla army also had their own doctors, so they didn't need to trouble Shiheng. As for the discussion of the battle plan, they would wait until their leader recovered. Chao Lu came in a hurry and left in a hurry. Looking at his back, Shiheng coldly snorted. This is clearly a trick to trick me into going to your camp. It seems like there really is something wrong with the Wara army. Someone, go invite General Fong over for the discussion. Not to mention that Shiheng was already on guard. When Chao Lu returned to the camp and told him what happened, Yeshen's expression changed again and again. So, Shiheng is guilty and doesn't dare to appear? Yes, leader, that's the feeling I get. It seems like there really is something wrong with the Baiming army. Chao Lu expressed his feelings. But why would they do this? Don't they know that compared to us, the 5-star army is their biggest enemy? If we let it continue, sooner or later, Baiming will regret it. Yeshen didn't understand and sighed. Then he shook his head and said, forget it. Since we're not on the same side, there's no point in staying here. Let's just leave. Knowing that there was danger, Yeshen wouldn't stay here and be a live target. Leaving was what he thought he should do. But he didn't expect that Chao Lu would stop him. Leader, this matter can't be rushed. We just went to find Shiheng during the day. If we prepare to retreat now, they'll definitely notice. I don't think the Baiming army has any intention of targeting us right now. Why don't we wait and see? We'll leave when they relax. This way, we'll be safer. Knowing that Hu Lu was right, Yeshen nodded in agreement. That's good too. In order to confuse them, we'll tell them that I'm sick and won't be around for 2 days. But you have to find those generals in private and tell them to prepare to retreat at any time. As long as we can leave here safely, some things should be thrown away. After sighing, Yeshen came to the bed in the tent and laid down. He was really going to pretend to be sick. In the Baiming army's main tent, Shiheng found Fong Dingshan and told him about Hu Lu's intentions. Then he asked for his opinion. General Fong, in your opinion, does Yeshen want to harm Marquis? Fong Dingshan didn't respect Shiheng from the bottom of his heart. Especially after working together for a while, he found that this person was very afraid of death after he got a high position. His ability was only above average, and he was even worse than Fong Dingshan in some aspects. Fong Dingshan only had his current position because of his good luck and seniority. If Shiheng died in battle, then the position of commander would fall on Fong Dingshan's head. Therefore, Fong Dingshan really hoped that something would happen to Shiheng. It would be best if he was killed. Of course, he wouldn't show any of this. When he saw Shiheng's fear of death, Fong Dingshan despised him in his heart, but he said with a nonchalant expression, that shouldn't be the case. The Walla army only has 50,000 cavalry. If they really hurt you, they won't be a match for our Baiming army. Is Commander overthinking it? After Fong Dingshan's explanation, Shiheng's worries were mostly gone. Thinking about it, if they really wanted to harm the Baiming army, the Walla army would have acted before the 100,000 cavalry left, and not now. Now that there was no news of the 100,000 cavalry leaving, it was indeed not the time to act. He shook his head and said, "It seems like Marquis is overthinking it." "Commander, you must be overthinking it." Fong Dingshan chuckled. At this moment, a soldier outside the tent asked to see him. The moment he entered the tent, he confirmed that he was indeed sick. Now, the news had spread throughout the entire Vala cavalry camp. Under normal circumstances, when a general was on the battlefield, even if he was sick, he wouldn't tell anyone. This could easily affect the morale of the army. Therefore, Shiheng never thought that Yeshen would pretend to be sick. Okay, you can leave. After telling the soldier to leave, Shiheng chuckled. It seems like Marquis is overthinking it. Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Marquis just got the news that the 100,000 soldiers from the 4 nearby cities are about to arrive. At that time, it will be time for us to attack the beginning city. General Fang, our chance to make a great contribution is coming. Then I shall congratulate you in advance, Commander. Fang Dingshan cupped his hands together. Then, there was a burst of laughter in the tent. 50 miles away from the northeast of the beginning city, an army that stretched far away was gathering here. They were the troops of Bugnam of Gojoseon, Yang Chendong, who had rushed here from the direction of the Wulubone River. In fact, they had been here for more than a day. Considering that the other troops had not yet arrived at the designated location, Yang Chendong ordered the army to stop and rest. Everyone was exhausted from the rapid march. Next was the counterattack, and their physical strength must keep up. Tell the soldiers to eat some dry food, rest more, and don't light a fire. Yang Chendong instructed the captain of the Longwei 1st Brigade, Chiu Vi took the order and left. Yang Chendong looked at Beta Persei who was standing beside him and asked, "Where is the Far Eastern Army?" "Young master, I just received their telegram. They will arrive at the designated location by tonight at the latest. Then, they will wait for the young master's order and the counterattack will begin." Beta Persei said excitedly. They had been rushing all the way, and finally, they were going to fight. Of course, he was happy because he loved fighting. "How many people do they have now?" Yang Chendong asked again. "Young master, almost all of the Liaodong army's 40,000 people have arrived. There are also nearly 20,000 people from the Mabe division, and about 40,000 Mongolian cavalry. In addition, there are 70,000 Walla cavalry prisoners who are being guarded by General Shi Wanshan and nearly 70,000 soldiers." Beta Persei replied respectfully. Chapter 1178. Okay, Yang Chendong's eyes showed confidence when he heard that there were 100,000 cavalry to help. "Tell Wang Shan to inform Tiger's man that we will launch a full-scale counterattack tomorrow morning. We will make the enemy pay the price and let them remember this painful lesson." Yes, Beta Persei agreed and turned to leave when he heard that the battle was tomorrow. "Wait, send a telegram to Feng Liang and tell him to inform Sha Bei to regain control of Shajing and Jingzhou City and cut off the retreat of the Walla cavalry." Yang Chendong thought that if it were not for the participation of Yeshen's troops, the Baiming army would not have been able to attack New City for such a long time without any worries. He was determined to hit them hard and even had the idea of taking down Yeshen. The telegrams were sent out one by one. Chen Bo, the commander of the Far Eastern Army, who received the telegram, issued an order to inform the troops to have a good rest tonight and start the counterattack tomorrow morning. The telegram was sent to Tiger's man in Jingzhou City, which made him excitedly slap the desk. A good desk was ruined just like that. "Great. Immediately inform Lord Yu, Division Commander Yang Si and other division commanders to come to the military headquarters for a meeting." Hu Mang laughed heartily. After waiting for more than a year, news of the counterattack had finally arrived. It was time for him to vent his frustrations. Shajing City. Director Feng Liang, who had been hiding in the basement, almost shouted out in excitement when he received the telegram from Yang Chendong. After suppressing the excitement in his heart, he gently knocked on the wall door leading to the ground room. After a while, Sha Bei walked in. Since Rong Shao left with 40,000 soldiers, most of the people who were monitoring him before also left, leaving only 2 people on the big tree outside the courtyard. They were only responsible for watching Sha Bei and not letting him leave the hospital. As for the situation in the courtyard, they didn't even want to look at it. A drunkard was not worthy of their attention. As soon as he entered the basement, he saw Feng Liang's excited look. Sha Bei was also happy, but he still asked tentatively and expectantly, "Director Feng, is there any good news?" "You're right," the sixth young master called. "Take a look at it yourself," Feng Liang said and handed the telegram to Sha Bei. Then, he saw the dignified man, who had silently swallowed all the grievances he had suffered, burst into tears. "Good, good. The sixth young master still believes in me. He has also given me an important task. This is the time for us to shed our shame." These days, Sha Bei's mental pressure was great. He had no choice but to surrender, and there was even an element of faking it. But how many people could understand him? Could the sixth young master really understand him? At least if it were him, if his subordinates publicly announced their surrender to Baiming, he would not believe them no matter what. Putting himself in Baiming's shoes, did Yang Chendong really trust him that much? This had become the biggest question in his heart all this time. Even though Feng Liang appeared in front of him, he was still very happy. However, this did not mean that the sixth young master really believed him. What if the sixth young master came to calm him down? Before he got the final answer, he could imagine how worried Sha Bei was. Now that he saw this telegram, he could finally be relieved. If Yang Chendong did not really trust him, how could he tell him the war plan in advance? When he thought about how the sixth young master still believed in him despite what he had done, Sha Bei felt like a gentleman would die for his bosom friend. What was not worth risking his life for? After he calmed down and walked out of the basement, Sha Bei's spirit changed at this moment. "Steward, do two things. First, bring people to kill that annoying fellow on the tree outside the courtyard. Second, inform Kong Ji and the other two teachers to come to my place for a meeting." The aura of a superior reappeared on Shibi's body, and his words were clear and forceful. The steward, who was originally a little stooped, suddenly straightened his body at this moment. He asked as if he did not know his master, "Master, killing people, don't be afraid. The weather will change soon. Some bedbugs should be dealt with very early," Sha Bei said with an imposing manner. Shajing City was nearly 1,000 miles away from the first city. It was unknown how long it would take for the news of the counterattack to arrive. He could prepare in advance here and did not have to worry about the news being leaked. Seeing that Sha Bei was so confident, the steward, who had been holding his breath for a long time, immediately said, "Yes, master. Don't worry. I'll arrange it now." They were just two soldiers in charge of the surveillance mission. When they were still leaning against the tree trunk to rest, two arrows suddenly pierced into their bodies. The speed and ferocity of the arrows was so fast that they didn't even have the strength to scream before they were sent to meet the King of Hell. After an hour, Kong Ji and the other two division commanders rushed to the new Second Army's military headquarters and saw Sha Bei, who had changed into a brand new general's military uniform. "Hee, you're here. Take a look. Wearing the 5-star Army's military uniform is still the best." Sha Bei laughed and turned around. "Military commander, you're..." Kong Ji asked in confusion, but he already had a vague feeling in his heart. "Come, it's time to tell you the sixth young master's plan. Division commanders, listen up," Sha Bei said in a powerful voice. The 3 division commanders stood up straight because of this. The long-lost feeling returned to their bodies. Su Mansion. Su Yuan was eating dinner. Compared to normal people who only ate one dish, or at most 3 or 4 dishes, he had more than a dozen dishes in front of him. Not only that, but there were also 2 beautiful women by his side. Ever since he submitted to Baiming, Su Yuan's life had fallen into debauchery. No one came to control him, and no one dared to control him. This made him more and more lawless and unruly. Especially after Rong Shao left, the entire city was completely under his control. He had even less scruples. Even when he ate, he was very ostentatious. He did not even need to use his hands. Instead, he needed someone to feed him, and it had to be a beautiful woman who fed him. While he was enjoying everything, he did not know that his brothers from the 1st Cavalry Division, led by Kong Ji, had surrounded the courtyard. His military power had already fallen. Those old brothers he trusted were either poisoned to death at home by the concubines of the CIA agents, or were ambushed and killed or captured by Kong Ji and the others on their way home or to the barracks. As for the infantry division, although there were 2 or 3 old brothers who escaped the net, because of their lack of strength, Sha Bei personally led the army into the barracks and dismembered them. Su Yuan was a selfish person. Ever since he took control of the military and took over Sha Bei, even if there were benefits, he would only share them with those old brothers. As for the ordinary soldiers under him, he did not care at all. The soldiers who were used to receiving high salaries from the 5-star army suddenly lost their source of income. Even if there was, it was pitifully little. Which one of them did not feel angry in their hearts? So when they saw Sha Bei wearing a general's uniform and leading troops into the barracks, not only did they not resist, but most of them even helped him to capture those who wanted to resist. The military incident ended with loud thunder and small raindrops. From the beginning to the end, there was no movement at all. Su Yuan, who had been enjoying himself in the mansion, did not notice at all. Until the housekeeper rushed into the dining room in a panic, Su Yuan was still lying in the arms of the beautiful woman and saying some dirty words. Old master, something bad has happened. After the housekeeper rushed in, his legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. What's going on? Su Yuan frowned slightly. He was very angry at the housekeeper's performance, and he was even angrier that such a good atmosphere was disturbed. Su Yuan still had an indifferent expression, but in the eyes of the housekeeper, he was angry that he did not fight back. However, he still knelt on the ground and trembled as he said, Old master, outside our mansion, there are a lot of soldiers. They have surrounded us? Oh. What? Su Yuan, who suddenly realized what was going on, was also shocked. Then, he stood up from the beauty's arms and asked loudly, We're surrounded. What the hell is going on? Which part are they from? Old master, you should go out and see for yourself. The housekeeper really did not know how to explain or how to answer, but he believed that facts spoke louder than words. Looking at the steward's appearance, Su Yuan had a bad feeling in his heart. However, the habit of being in a position of power made him not lose his head out of fear. Instead, he shouted towards the outside of the hall, Men, bring me my weapons and armor. Su Yuan, who had put on his armor and picked up his weapons, opened the door with more than 40 bodyguards in the mansion. Who dares to surround this general's mansion? Do you want to die? As soon as the door opened, a loud roar was heard. This was the preemptive strike. Su Yuan wanted to use this method to intimidate the people who came. As long as the other party was scared, he could take the opportunity to leave here and go to the military camp to mobilize soldiers. At that time, whoever came to find trouble with him would die a horrible death. However, the result was destined to disappoint him. Not only did his roar not intimidate the people around him, but a loud laugh was heard instead. The person said, Mr. Su, you are so arrogant. Looks like you really have the prestige of an official after becoming a Beiming official. You dare to kill anyone. The voice was so familiar. Su Yuan looked towards the source of the voice and saw his former colleague, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji, riding on a horse and looking at him with a smile on his face. What was even more eye-catching was that the other party was wearing the green uniform of the 5-star army and the white cape of the division commander. He looked majestic and heroic. The person who came was actually Kong Ji. Su Yuan knew that it was impossible to use his status to intimidate others. His expression changed from anger to a smile and said, I was wondering who it was. So it's Mr. Kong. But what is the meaning of this? Why did you bring so many people to my mansion? Is there a military operation? Why didn't I know about it? Chapter 1179. He was just pretending to be confused. The other party had already surrounded his residence. It was obvious that they were coming with a strong momentum, not to mention that they were wearing the military uniform of the 5-star army. However, Su Yuan deliberately ignored this. He didn't mention it because he wanted to stall for time. He believed that the news of his mansion being surrounded must have spread. Perhaps if he held on for a little longer, his old brothers would come and rescue him. Seeing that Su Yuan was still talking nonsense, Kong Ji shook his head. This person was a little smart, but only a little smart. He didn't have a long-term vision. He was destined to not achieve anything big. Sigh, Mr. Su, you don't have to pretend anymore. You should be able to see why I'm here. I think it's better for you to surrender so that you won't lose face in front of so many people. Kong Ji pointed out the truth. This was the same as poking through the last layer of window paper. It was somewhat out of Su Yuan's expectations. He couldn't help but be surprised. Hearing Kong Ji's confident tone, could it be that he had already taken over the entire Shajing city? If that was the case, then he was really in danger. But how could he do it? Not only was there his infantry division here, there were also the 1st Cavalry Division, the 2nd Cavalry Division, the 3rd Cavalry Division, and other troops. How could he, a small commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, convince them all? Unless Commander Yi Bei stood up personally. When he thought about Yi Bei, shouldn't he be drinking in his mansion now? Right, why didn't the two people who usually kept an eye on the new 2nd Army report today? They should have sent a message before dinner. What was going on? Were they scared by the appearance of Kong Ji and the others? Even at this time, Su Yuan still didn't think that Yi Bei would stand up one day. After all, he was the one who wrote the public surrender letter. In order to please Baiming, he even killed his guard captain, Wuxia. Such a person was basically useless. In a short period of time, it could be said that a myriad of thoughts ran through his mind. The final result was that they could still fight. Kong Ji first looked at the soldiers surrounding his mansion and found that most of them were still wearing the uniforms of the Baiming army. He immediately felt confident and stopped talking to Kong Ji. Instead, he said to the soldiers, "Brothers, Kong Ji has lost his mind and wants to deal with me. I am Baiming's personal lord of Shajing City. You want to deal with me because you want to fall out with Baiming, but have you thought about the consequences? You'll be beheaded and your family will be implicated." Needless to say, Su Yuan's shout did cause a certain amount of disturbance in the army. Even now, there were still many soldiers who didn't understand what was going on. It was only out of habit that they followed their commanding officer to carry out the mission. Just now, outside the mansion, when they saw that Su Yuan's mansion was surrounded, some people were confused. Now that these words were said, many people's faces changed dramatically. Some even looked at the leader, Kong Ji, with a somewhat different gaze. This change fell into Su Yuan's eyes and naturally made him very happy. He immediately added fuel to the fire and said, "This is clearly Kong Ji wanting to offend his superiors. This is all his own idea. Brothers, don't be confused and make mistakes with him. How about this, I will only catch the ringleader and don't care about the accomplices. If anyone is willing to follow me, it will be a meritorious performance. Later, not only will I not hold him accountable, but I will also reward him." The soldiers who were originally at a loss and muttering in their hearts became more hesitant after hearing Su Yuan's shout. Some people were even considering whether to stand by Su Yuan's side. Kong Ji didn't expect that at this time, Su Yuan could still make such a counterattack. He couldn't help but be amused for a moment and said, "What? Is this the final battle of a trapped beast? Do you really think that I didn't prepare at all before coming here? Humph, if you want to die, then this division commander will fulfill your wish. Come, invite the commander." Just a moment ago, Si Bei had already arrived, but he didn't stand out. Instead, he stood outside the team. Kong Ji had already seen this. He thought of what Commander Si-Bei said in the previous meeting. He said that he didn't want to face the traitor Su Yuan, so he didn't have the intention to invite the commander. But now, the morale of the army was obviously shaken. If the commander didn't come out, then it was very likely that there would be a problem. The moment Si-Bei called for the commander, the crowd and the team panicked. Just as many people looked around, Si-Bei appeared. He was wearing the 5-star Army's uniform, especially the shining golden beads on his shoulder. Even though the sky was about to turn dark, they were still very dazzling. Si-Bei finally appeared. When Kong Ji called for the commander, Su Yuan felt that something was wrong. This seemed to be completely out of his control and even imagination. And when he saw the Shui appear, this feeling became reality, making him feel as if he had been struck by lightning. A commander was a commander after all. His prestige wasn't something that Division Commander Kong Ji could compare with. In particular, there were all kinds of people. Due to the lack of time, there were people from all divisions. Kong Ji was only a division commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. It was obviously difficult for him to completely control them. But when it came to Si-Bei, this wasn't a problem. As a commander, which soldier wasn't his former soldier? Si-Bei's appearance caused the noisy discussions from before to immediately disappear. The situation was immediately reversed, and Su Yuan was pressured to the point that he couldn't breathe. After being stunned for a few breaths, Su Yuan's expression turned from black to white and then back to black. When he saw Si-Bei appear, still wearing the 5-star Army's uniform, he knew that things were going in the worst direction. But he still wouldn't give up without a fight. He was very clear what kind of role he had played before and how many things he had done wrong to the 5-star Army. In the new 2nd Army, anyone could surrender, but he couldn't. Based on what he had done, even if Si-Bei didn't kill him, he wouldn't be able to answer to Bugnam of Gojoseon. He didn't have any friendship with Yang Chendong. He didn't believe that Yang Chendong would spare him, a two-faced person. If he didn't want to give up without a fight, then he could only fight back. Even if Si-Bei personally appeared, Su Yuan still pretended to be unafraid and shouted, "Commander Si-Bei, aren't you sleeping every day? What are you doing here? Oh, I know. You must have been threatened by someone, right? The person who threatened you is Kong Ji, right? Don't worry, with me here, no one can hurt you. As long as you stand on my side, I can guarantee your safety." Originally, because of Si-Bei's appearance, all the soldiers started to take sides. But with Su Yuan's shout, some of the weak-willed soldiers became confused. Could it be that Kong Ji really threatened the commander and that Kong Ji wanted to rebel? The changes in the soldiers below didn't escape Si-Bei's eyes. He couldn't help but sigh and said, "Enough, Su Yuan. I didn't expect you to have such ability. You can turn black into white and say it so righteously. I'm afraid that people who don't know you will really believe your words. But what's true is true. How can it change because of a few words from you? Sigh, surrender. I will plead with Bugnam of Gojoseon to save your life." After saying this to Su Yuan, Si-Bei didn't have any intention of stopping. Instead, he said to the surrounding soldiers, "Soldiers, Si-Bei was forced by the situation and for the survival of the new 2nd Army. I had no choice but to bow to Baiming. But this doesn't really mean that I want to surrender to Baiming. It's just a temporary measure. And all of this has also received the support of Bugnam of Gojoseon. Now, Bugnam of Gojoseon has sent news that he has brought his army to the grasslands. Now, he is besieging the Baiming army and the Walla army. It won't be long before he brings his army to our Shajing city. In order to welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon, what we need to do now is to take back the city and do everything we should do." Moreover, Bugnam of Gojoseon also said that he understands the decision that everyone made under that situation. So, he won't make things difficult for any of us. Please don't worry about this. When the soldiers heard Si-Bei's speech, they all revealed a joyful expression. A person's reputation was like the shadow of a tree. Just the 3 words, Bugnam of Gojoseon, represented a magnificent army. It was an invincible aura and influence. It seemed that as long as Yang Chendong was there to fight, no matter how difficult the problem was, it would be easily solved. Long live Bugnam of Gojoseon, long live Bugnam of Gojoseon. No one knew who took the lead to shout, but at that moment, many people shouted loudly. Even the few bodyguards behind Su Yuan hesitated for a moment before they put down their weapons and shouted loudly. To others, the thunder-like shouts were shocking, but to Su Yuan, it was no less than a death sentence. He knew that the overall situation was set, and he could not turn the situation around. Thus, he fell into a state of madness. He suddenly pointed at Bei and said, You are a villain, a fickle villain. Villain, you are talking about yourself, right? The 5-star army has treated you well, and Bugnam of Gojoseon has treated you even better. You actually secretly contacted Baiming and thought of betrayal. People like you are the one who is shameful. This time, without Bei saying anything, Kong Ji had already started to scold. Unlike Su Yuan, who got his position as a division commander with Bei's help, Kong Ji's position as a division commander was personally appointed by Yang Chendong. Moreover, Kong Ji was a Han Chinese. He had once served in the 5-star army and performed well. Although he was not Yang Chendong's student, in terms of loyalty, he was much stronger than a foreigner like Su Yuan. Su Yuan, who had already gone crazy, did not pay attention to Kong Ji. Instead, he looked at Bei and said, Tell me, did you never trust me? You are lying to me, right? Chapter 1180. She shook her head. If she didn't trust Su Yuan, she wouldn't have taken the initiative to ask Yang Chendong for the position of infantry division commander. It could be said that her one-sided kindness had harmed the other party. But now, there was no need to explain this. She didn't say anything, which made Su Yuan burst into laughter. I knew it, I knew it. Ha ha ha, you never trusted me. You're a despicable person. For your big plan, you don't care about anyone's life. Even your guard captain, Wu Xiaoyi, you killed him without hesitation. A person like you is inhumane. Whoever follows you will be betrayed by you sooner or later. Bullshit. Kong Ji was still the one who shouted. The matter of guard captain Wu was originally discussed with the military commander. He also volunteered. If he didn't do that, how could you rest assured that the military commander had really surrendered? He used his own life to ensure that our entire new second army didn't scatter and fall into chaos. He is the biggest hero. Kong Ji's eyes turned red when he talked about Wu Xiaoyi's matter. Wu Xiaoyi's death was his own request. At that time, Kong Ji and Bei both shed tears after hearing it. Now, it seemed that everything was worth it. If it wasn't for this, even if Bei wasn't harmed by Baiming, she would have been forced to go somewhere else. In this way, it would be very difficult for the new second army to unite and form a joint force. The sacrifice of one person in exchange for the integrity of an army was worth it no matter how one looked at it. And the person who sacrificed himself was naturally a great hero. Su Yuan, who just found out the truth, widened his eyes in disbelief. He thought that Wu Xiaoyi's matter was an exception and that Bei had no choice but to deal with it. He didn't expect that everything was premeditated. Thinking about it, it wasn't wrong. It was precisely because of Wu Xiaoyi's death that he and Rong Shao lost their vigilance against Bei. The idea of transferring Bei away from here also stopped at that moment. He had never thought that all of this had been discussed beforehand. Thinking about how he had already fallen into someone else's trap from then on, and how it was normal for him to end up like this, he had nothing to say about his defeat. Su Yuan, who knew the truth, seemed to have aged a lot in that instant. In the eyes of the others, it was more or less unbearable. After all, this was his old brother. Sai, you should decide on your own. You should know that once you fall into the hands of others, it will be difficult for you to even die. Originally, Shirbi wanted to plead with Yang Chendong, but looking at this person's recent actions, it was simply unforgivable. Instead of waiting to be captured and tortured, it was better to have a quick death. It could also be considered as leaving behind the last bit of dignity in life. As soon as he said that, Su Yuan's body, which was about to collapse, straightened up again. People said that a bad life was better than a good death. He didn't want to die, and with a plop, he knelt in front of Shirbi. Military commander, I don't want to die. We are old brothers who have gone through fire and water together for many years. Please spare my life for the sake of my hard work even if I didn't make any contributions. Bugnam of Gojoseon admires you so much. As long as you are willing to plead for mercy, he will definitely spare me. As he spoke, he crawled on the ground and quickly came under Shirbi's mount. Su Yuan spoke with snot and tears. Looking at Su Yuan's appearance, Shirbi felt a trace of pity, but military discipline was a mountain, so he still turned his head to the side. If he really let Su Yuan go, how would he explain to the sixth young master, and how would he explain to the dead Wu Xiaoyi? After continuously crying a few times, there was no response from Shirbi. Su Yuan's eyes flashed with madness, and he suddenly shouted, "No." Why? We are old brothers who have gone through hard times together. You can be a military commander, but I can only be a division commander. You can obtain Bugnam of Gojoseon's trust, but I can't. I don't accept this. Shirbi, I will kill you. I want you to go to hell with me. As he shouted, Su Yuan pulled out his waist knife, raised it high, and chopped down at Shirbi. Puchi. A sharp curved knife pierced through his body. Su Yuan's eyes widened as he watched the tip of the knife come out of his chest. He then looked back at Kong Ji, who was one step ahead of him, and the light in his eyes quickly dimmed. His head drooped, and he died on the spot. This was the ugliest of human nature. When you made a mistake, you didn't know how to repent. Instead, you just blamed everything on others. When things were irreparable, you would plead for mercy. When your pleading failed, you would reveal your true nature. Unfortunately, Kong Ji had long been prepared for this move, and at the crucial moment, killed him first. Bury him. Shirbi sighed and said to the bodyguard beside him. Then, he didn't look at Su Yuan who was killed. Instead, he said to Kong Ji, "Change the flag. Announce to all the people in the city that we have changed flags and have returned to the embrace of the 5-star army." This was how the superiors were. They couldn't be too soft-hearted. Otherwise, they wouldn't only hurt themselves, but also those who believed in them and followed them. After the order was given, Shaojing and Jingzhou City were closed. The original Beiming dragon flag was also replaced with a bright 5-star red flag. Under the great wisdom of Shirbi and the others, the new Second Army was finally saved. At the same time, it also formed a response, and sounded the horn for the destruction of the world of Wara. Shur City. A new day, the sun rose as usual. It was a sunny day, and the weather was very good. There was no wind or rain, and the blue sky and green grass made people feel relaxed and happy. But this day was another dark day for the Beiming army and the Wala army. Just when most of the soldiers got up and were about to eat breakfast, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the ground. It was like spring thunder, completely breaking the tranquility of the grassland. After a series of rumbling sounds, a large number of troops appeared in the north and northwest of the barracks. They were like a sudden gust of wind, flying straight like a sharp arrow, approaching from afar. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The scouts in charge of the security of the barracks shouted loudly, disrupting the normal order of the barracks. In the Beiming army's main tent, a scout rushed into the tent and fell to the ground. He said with his pale face, "Marquis. Marquis, The reinforcements of the 5-star army are here. The reinforcements are here. Shi Heng, who was eating breakfast with the help of the servants, froze when he heard this. Then, his face darkened. Reinforcements? How many of them are here? Uncountable. There are so many of them. There is no end to them. The scout was so scared that he didn't know what to say. He could only tell the most direct impression. Bullshit. That's ridiculous. How can there be so many 5-star army here? Shi Heng reprimanded loudly. He waved his hand and dismissed the scout. Then, he hurriedly said to the soldier beside him, "Pass down the order. The entire army is ready to fight. Take out my armor and weapons." After all, he was a veteran of the battlefield. He had participated in many life and death battles. He still had the basic composure. This scene didn't only happen in Shi Heng's tent, but also in other large tents. Just like in Sun Guang's tent, Su Dei had already arrived. "General Sun, the 5-star army is here. Let's prepare to retreat." "Retreat? Can't we fight?" Sun Guang said with some dissatisfaction. Usually, Su Dei was quite brave. Back then, they were able to break through the outer city of Shi City by relying on his bravery. But now, he became so cowardly. "Fight? How do we fight? Why don't you go out and take a look?" Su Dei shook his head bitterly. He was very clear about Sun Guang's courage. However, if he could still say these words after seeing the lineup of the 5-star army, then he really had to admire him. Sun Guang, who was a little suspicious, really walked out of the tent. When he saw the endless cavalry of the 5-star army not far away, he almost rolled down from the platform. He was already sweating profusely. He looked at Su Dei and said anxiously, "Retreat, retreat. Everyone retreat." "Roger." This was the answer Su Dei wanted. He didn't have the slightest intention to remind Sun Guang that Shi Heng hadn't given the order to retreat. What he wanted was to create chaos without fighting. This would be more beneficial for the expansion of the Bugnam of Gojosian army. Sun Guang ran away without any backbone. At this moment, Shi Heng was still arranging the defense at the front line. The 70,000 Liaodong cavalry were already eager to fight. Fang Dingshan rode on a tall horse with excitement in his eyes. He had long heard about how powerful the cavalry of the 5-star army was. Today, he could finally see who was better. This had always been his dream. He wanted to defeat the 5-star army in front of so many people and tell the world that the Liaodong cavalry was the strongest. Rong Shao also came and stood beside Shi Heng. At this moment, his eyes were filled with determination. This was his first time fighting a war. He had never experienced such a cruel scene before. He thought that fighting a war was just as exciting as storytelling. He didn't know the dangers and bloodshed in it. Rong Shao's confidence came from the 100,000 soldiers behind him. In his heart, he was secretly happy that he could perform well in front of Admiral Shi Heng. In his opinion, his side had a few 100,000 cavalry and infantry. It was enough to fight against the reinforcements of the 5-star army. Perhaps it would be a great achievement, a great contribution. Compared to Yu Rongshao's calmness, Shi Heng, who was riding on the horse, had a worried look on his face. He had a feeling that since the reinforcements of the 5-star army appeared so openly, they must have come prepared. Then what was their backup plan? Was it just a cavalry charge? Facing the Baiming army that was making all kinds of preparations, there would be no victory in this kind of charging formation. Was the 5-star army crazy? Why did they choose to fight like this? Just as Shi Heng was thinking about the reason for all of this, where was the 5-star army's backup plan, and how to fight this battle, a messenger appeared with a panicked expression. "Marquis, bad news, bad news." Chapter 1181. What's the matter? Why are you so panicky? How can you be so calm? Looking at the cowardly side of his subordinate, Shiheng reprimanded him. He had already decided to punish this messenger after the big battle. Without paying attention to Shiheng's displeasure, the messenger knelt on the ground and said with a trembling body, "Marquis, the Walla army has retreated. They didn't have the intention to greet us and rushed out of the barracks." Hearing the news that the Walla army had retreated, Shiheng's eyes narrowed for no reason and he had a bad premonition. During this period of time, everyone had been on guard against each other and they were no longer as sincere as they were at the beginning. However, even though he was mentally prepared, Shiheng was still very angry when he heard that they had retreated without fighting. Got it. You just said that there's more. What else? There's more. Deputy Chief Guang has escaped with 50,000 infantrymen under him. As if he had exhausted all his strength, the messenger mustered up the courage to finish speaking. What? Hearing this news, Shiheng's expression changed drastically. He turned around abruptly and the sword on his body was placed on the messenger's neck. With the cold sword on his neck, the messenger's face suddenly turned pale. However, since Shiheng had asked this question, he had to answer it. He could only continue to speak. Just now, Deputy Chief Guang has retreated with his troops. They withdrew all the troops that were attacking the city and fled to the south. Ayaya, Guang, you've ruined Marquis' plan. Hearing that Guang had also escaped, Shiheng's expression changed drastically. Although Guang only had 50,000 soldiers in his hands, he was responsible for attacking the first city. Once they retreated, the 5-star army in the first city would no longer be in danger. At the same time, they might be behind him. If that was the case, how could he resist? Not to mention, after days of bitter battles, the 50,000 soldiers under Guang had experienced life and death situations. They could be described as elites. Once they left, not only would their combat power be greatly reduced, they would also not be able to find a replacement. Guang's escape added even more uncertainty to the battle. In a fit of anger, he swung his saber and the messenger's head flew into the air. Shiheng, who had killed someone, had red eyes and even his arms were trembling. It was obvious that he was angry in his heart. Report. Marquis, the 4 gates of the first city have been opened. They've rushed out of the inner city and are heading toward our camp in the outer city. Another messenger rushed over on horseback. Before he arrived, his shout had already resounded in the air. If Guang was still around, they would have been able to more or less delay the 5-star army in the city from leaving the city since they had already taken down the outer city. But now, it was too late. Shiheng's body shook slightly on the horse. Before the battle had even begun, the result had already been decided. Now that he was facing internal and external troubles, he knew that he had already lost. Shiheng forced himself to stay alert. He looked at Rong Xiao who was not far away and said to the bodyguard beside him, "Ask General Rong to come over. Also, you go and inform General Fang to retreat immediately." Rong Xiao was still riding on his horse, feeling the tense atmosphere before the battle. For him, who was on the battlefield for the first time, this feeling was very exciting. It caused his adrenaline to rise uncontrollably. His face also turned a lot redder because of this. "General Rong, Marquis wants to see you." The bodyguard walked over and conveyed Shiheng's military order. Okay, thank you for your trouble." Rong Xiao was very excited when he heard that Shiheng wanted to see him. He, who had focused all his attention on the battlefield, did not know what had happened behind the scenes. If he knew, he would not be happy but scared to death. He came in front of Shiheng with an excited face. He tried his best to appear calm in order to leave the best side of Shiheng. "Not bad. It's General Rong's first time on the battlefield, yet you're so calm. You truly have the demeanor of a great general." Shiheng, who was trying his best to raise his spirits, praised Rong Shao. This time, whether they could successfully escape or not depended on this person. Thank you, Marquis, for your praise. This is all because of your leadership. Rong Shao did not dare to take the credit. Very good. You are not anxious or impatient. Not bad. Since that is the case, I will leave the first battle to you. Can you complete it? There was no time, and Shi Heng did not want to prepare any more groundwork. He went straight to the point. Hearing that he could be the vanguard, Rong Shao was very excited. He patted his chest and said, Marquis, please rest assured. Our swords and arrows want to drink blood. We want to have a taste. Okay, I approve. You can go. As long as you make a great contribution, Marquis will definitely report it to the Emperor and ask for your reward. Seeing Rong Shao so set off, Shi Heng's face finally showed a trace of satisfaction. Thank you, Marquis. Rong Shao cupped his fists and said gratefully. He then turned around and rode away. He did not know that once he left, he would never return. Let's retreat. After looking at Rong Shao's back, Shi Heng turned around and left. War was like this. It was either you die or I live. In order to survive, he could only sacrifice Rong Shao and his 100,000 troops. On the other side, Shi Heng's order also reached the ears of Liaodong Iron Cavalry General Fang Dingshan. You want us to retreat? What the hell? Fang Dingshan, who had long been prepared to compete with the 5-star troop, was obviously unhappy. He looked at the messenger with a glint in his eyes and a murderous aura exuded from his body. General, this is Marquis order. The messenger thought for a moment and was afraid that Fang Dingshan would vent his anger on him. Marquis had already killed one, and he did not want to be the second. Thinking of this, he carefully moved forward and said, General, the Walla cavalry has already retreated. General Sun Guang also left with his troops. When Marquis told me to inform you, he was also prepared to retreat. What do you think? Fang Dingshan, who was about to vent his anger on the messenger soldier, involuntarily paused. After about 3 breaths, he let out a long sigh. I see. Thank you for the information. General, you are too serious. Please hurry up. When the messenger heard Fang Dingshan's words of gratitude, he immediately let out a long sigh of relief. He then cupped his fists and left. After the messenger left, Fang Dingshan did not dare to delay any longer. He said to Luo Baikuan, pass down the order. All troops retreat. Retreat. Military orders were like mountains. Although Luo Baikuan still had a lot of questions, since it was the general's order, he had to carry it out. After he agreed, he ordered the 70,000 Liaodong cavalry to retreat in echelons. Elites were indeed elites. Even when they were retreating, they were still orderly. Compared to the army led by Shi Heng and Sun Guang who were fleeing in panic, they were much better. The 5-star army had arrived. According to yesterday's agreement, they launched a general attack at 3 in the morning. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers outside the city and tens of thousands of soldiers inside the city launched an attack together. If Shi Heng could have predicted this, or if he could have remained calm in the face of danger, with his advantage in numbers and the cooperation with the Wara cavalry, he might not have lost the battle. On the contrary, as long as he persevered, victory was not impossible. After all, the provisions of the new army in the beginning city had been used up. Just this morning, Yang Si took out all the food he had stored and made a delicious meal for the soldiers. It was as if he was going to break the axe and sink the boat. If such an opponent could be suppressed, it would only take a long time for the morale to drop, and it would be time for a counterattack. Unfortunately, under a series of small actions and preparations, Baiming and Walla could not be of one mind, let alone fight the enemy together. When he learned that the 5-star army suddenly appeared in the east and north and began to attack, leader Yeshen decisively gave the order to retreat. He could not guarantee that when the 5-star army arrived, the Baiming army could not be relied on. He would never put his hopes on the so-called allies, especially those who were not reliable. Yeshen's retreat was just a signal to retreat. Next was Tsinguang's 50,000 soldiers, Fang Dingshan's 70,000 Liaodong cavalry, and Shiheng's 30,000 elite soldiers. An entire army of 200,000 retreated without a fight, leaving Rong Shao and the 100,000 infantrymen on the battlefield. From an advantage to a disadvantage, the originally fierce battle ended up like this. It seemed to be a coincidence, but if one thought about it carefully, it was inevitable. If the alliance was not united, it would be better not to unite. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Having said that, Rong Shao, who was completely unaware of all this, was riding on his warhorse in high spirits and watching his army get into formation to fight the enemy. As expected of a merchant, he knew how to maximize the benefits of everything. After receiving Shiheng's order, he gathered the generals under his command and told them openly, "Let's go and see what's going on. I am a person who does not know much about war, nor do I know much about military matters. However, there is one thing that I know, and that is that it is natural for soldiers to eat grain. Therefore, what I want to do is to solve your worries. How about this? In this battle, no matter how the court rewards the generals who have made great contributions, I will reward them with 1,000 to 10,000 taels of silver. How about it? When there is a great reward, there will be brave men." Under the great reward, the generals were all excited. They all expressed that they would fight this battle well and add glory to Rong Shao's face. Laughing with satisfaction, Rong Shao watched the generals leave the tent. Humming an unknown tune, he called for the military singers and prostitutes, and just like that, they began to drink in the big tent. To Rong Shao, as long as everything was arranged to the right people, he only needed to wait for the good news in the big tent. While drinking wine and watching the music and dance, he even imagined the scene of going to Shiheng to report his victory. Presumably, this time, he would definitely achieve great success. First City. All the cavalry warriors of the new army had done all the preparation work before 3:00 in the morning. They filled their stomachs, fed their war horses, sharpened their swords and spears, and prepared their bows and arrows. As soon as the time was up, they would set off together and rush out of the city. They wanted to vent all the grievances that they had suffered during these days at this moment. Chapter 1182. As the commander of the army, Tiger's man wore an eye-catching purple cloak. It was the unique symbol of a first-rank officer. At this moment, he was also riding on a horse with a scimitar in his hand. He had given the order for the entire army to charge. According to the plan, the 5-star army outside the city would attack half an hour before the hour of the 5-star army. After all, the distance between the two sides was quite far and it would take some time for them to rush over. The 5-star army inside the city would only need to wait for the hour of the 5-star army to pass before launching their attack. Just as the hour of the 5-star army passed by and Tiger's man was prepared to charge into the city, the scout suddenly sent a message saying that the Baiming army on the outer city gate was beginning to retreat. What's going on? How is this possible? Tiger's man said with a face of disbelief. The war hadn't officially begun yet. How could the Baiming army retreat? Suspecting that this was a trap, Tiger's man personally led a group of generals to the inner city gate tower. As expected, they saw the Baiming soldiers fleeing in panic. Through the binoculars, they could clearly see the Baiming army soldiers on the outer city gate tower quickly rushing down the city. Some people even threw the Baiming dragon flag in their hands to the ground in order to save time. There were also some soldiers who were pushing each other and cursing as they went down the city gate. Some of the more violent ones even attacked, but there were no deaths. This can't be fake, right? Deng Yu, the commander of the new 1st Army's 2nd Cavalry Division, who saw all of this through the binoculars, couldn't believe it. After all, chaos before the war had even begun. This didn't make sense, so it was normal to think more about it. Fake? If this is all an act by the Baiming army for us to see, then I can only say that they shot themselves in the foot. What's so scary about an army without any morale? How could they be a match for our new first army? Tiger's man put down the binoculars and said with a proud expression. In a battle between two armies, the level of morale often determined the outcome of the battle. Unless it was a very elite army, otherwise, it was absolutely impossible to stage such a scene because it was very likely that the morale of the army would really be really lax and out of control. That's right. It's very likely to be true. Although we don't know what's going on outside, we shouldn't miss such an opportunity. Commander, I suggest we launch the attack in advance, Lu Zhua, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, requested after putting down his binoculars. That's right, our heavy cavalry regiment requests for battle. Regiment Commander Windchaser said. Our light cavalry regiment is fast, we also request to fight. Commander Ma Xiangshan did not forget the last time they encountered the Liaodong Iron Cavalry that retreated without a fight. Although there was a military order for him to retreat at that time, and although it seemed that the order was correct, it was still a humiliation to him and the light cavalry regiment. Even in his dreams, he wanted to take revenge. Our reconnaissance regiment also requests to fight. Regiment Commander Ding Shan also stood up. Okay, seeing that it was about to become a mobilization meeting, Tiger's mane quickly waved his hand. Since everyone is so full of fighting spirit, then I don't think there's any need to prioritize. Let's go out in 4 cities. In short, we have to go all out and defeat the enemy. Yes. There was no need to fight. Everyone could go out of the city with the fastest speed to join the battle. The Tiger generals were all eager to try, and their faces were full of murderous intent. Next, the generals rushed down the city. Then, the 4 main city gates of the first city, which led to the outside world, were all opened. Then, the vast cavalry army rushed out and rushed to the barracks behind Rong Xiao's army, which was not prepared. After receiving Rong Xiao's promise of a heavy reward, the generals were full of fighting spirit. Because of this, they all wanted to make the first contribution. The generals who were supposed to be in charge of the security at the rear also moved their troops to the front. In this way, they could find an opportunity for themselves. It was precisely this kind of move that made their rear seem very empty. When the new cavalry army rushed out of the inner city, smoothly passed through the outer city, and arrived at the rear of the Baiming army, they did not encounter any decent resistance at all. Although the division commanders and regimental commanders were also very curious as to why such a result occurred, they did not stop attacking. Instead, when they arrived at the rear of Rong Xiao's army and saw that the enemy's rear was undefended, one by one, they pounced forward like wolves and tigers. They did not care why such a fatal loophole appeared in the Baiming army. They only knew that if they did not take advantage of the situation, they would be bastards. Since the enemy was not prepared, they only needed to charge forward. They would definitely not greet the enemy first and give the enemy time to prepare for battle. As a result, the Baiming army was in a tragic situation. Suddenly, tens of thousands of cavalrymen from the 5-star army appeared behind them. It was as if the heavens had descended from the sky. Several Baiming army that had reached tens of thousands of soldiers were almost defeated after being stabbed in the butt. This kind of defeat quickly affected the other Baiming army nearby. Some generals even did not know what to do with their troops. Should they prepare their bows and arrows to kill the 5-star army? Or should they turn around and deal with the 5-star army that had suddenly appeared behind them? Even the generals could not make a decision at the first moment. The soldiers below were even more chaotic. Many soldiers had fled before the battle. There were also many people who were smart enough to kneel on the spot and raise their weapons high. They were already prepared to surrender. 100,000 soldiers. Although it seemed like a lot, if they really fought, it would be difficult to kill them all even after a day and a night. However, when the thoughts of surrendering and fleeing took over, it was not that difficult to deal with. In less than an hour, the army began to collapse. When the 5-star army arrived in front of them, it did not take much effort for them to easily obtain victory. The 1st Cavalry Division was the most outstanding cavalry. Under the leadership of Division Commander Jianghu, they were the first batch of 5-star army cavalrymen to charge into the Baiming army. The original 10,000 soldiers had now expanded to 20,000 under Yang Chendong's special permission. This was also their first battle after the expansion. Division Commander Jianghu's request for everyone was to perform well, especially the veterans. They had to set an example for the new recruits and let them know what it meant to be invincible and invincible. When the 20,000 cavalrymen rushed over excitedly, they saw that the Baiming army was basically defenseless. The scene of kneeling and surrendering was so spectacular and so ironic. Even Division Commander Jianghu, who had experienced countless bitter battles, did not know how to describe what he was seeing at this moment. Division Commander, what is going on? 1st Cavalry Division Commander Temu rode to Jianghu's side and scratched his head with a confused expression. Not only Commander Temu, but even Jianghu himself did not know what was going on. However, he was still a division commander and had been placed in an important position by Yang Chendong. His ability to adapt was still very strong. After a short moment of hesitation, he said, "Let's not care about that. We will continue the pursuit as planned. As for these captives, let the people behind us deal with them." The 1st Cavalry Division was the strongest cavalry division. What they should be doing was searching for the strongest opponent that matched their status, not standing here and receiving captives. After Jianghu gave the order, the 20,000 cavalrymen leaped over the captives and continued to charge forward as if they did not see them. Even when they passed by Rong Xiao's camp, they did not have any intention of stopping. Following closely behind were the new army and the Liaodong Cavalry Division. They only stopped for a moment before making the same decision as the 1st Cavalry Division. They let go of the Baiming captives and continued to chase forward. Before they came, Yang Chendong had personally given the order that their opponents this time were the Walla Cavalry and the 70,000 Liaodong Cavalry of Baiming. As long as they dealt a heavy blow to them, the 5-star army would have no opponents on the grasslands in the future. This would be a great achievement. As for the Baiming captives who did not even have the will to fight, who would care about them? 3 armies passed by one after another without the slightest pause. This frightened Rong Xiao, who was in the tent. A moment ago, he was still drinking wine and watching music. However, in the next moment, someone came to report that the army was in chaos. The 5-star army cavalry appeared from all directions, and several generals had already knelt down and begged the 5-star army to surrender. The wine that he had just drunk was spat out from his mouth. Rong Xiao sat there in a daze, as if he had been struck by lightning. It was not strange for him to have such an expression. If it was someone else, they would not be any better. It was just 100,000 Ming Dynasty soldiers. Even if infantry were weaker than cavalry, they should not have been defeated in less than an hour. Moreover, didn't they also have cavalry? Whether it was the Walla cavalry or the 70,000 elite Liaodong cavalry, what did they do? Did they also lose? There were too many things that he could not understand. At this moment, Rong Xiao did not know that Shiheng and the cavalry had already escaped. He was still sitting there like a fool. Until the sound of tremors came from the tent, and someone came to report that the 5-star army cavalry was charging towards the tent. Rong Xiao was even more cowardly as he buried his head under the table. He did not even dare to raise his head. He did not have the demeanor of a commander of 100,000 soldiers. At this moment, Rong Xiao could only pray in his heart that no one would notice him. No one would discover him. Perhaps his prayers really worked. Surprisingly, those cavalry troops didn't enter his tent and just ran past him several hundred meters away. The outside quickly returned to silence, and no one came into the tent. Rong Shao patted his chest and got up from the table. Then, he saw that everyone in the tent was like him, trembling on the ground. If it was only the dancers who were behaving like this, it could still be forgiven. After all, they were women, not soldiers, so he couldn't be too strict with them. However, the bodyguards who were protecting him were also behaving like this, which really made Rong Shao furious. He couldn't help but shout loudly, "You! What are you all doing? Ah!" Chapter 1183. This shout scared the bodyguards who were kneeling on the ground. None of them dared to raise their heads. Rumble. Rong Shao, who was about to stand up and teach those bodyguards a lesson, once again hid under the table. His body trembled once again. Rong Shao was about to stand up and teach those bodyguards a lesson. However, the same thing happened again. The cavalry passed by the camp again and did not disturb them. When everything quieted down, Rong Shao lifted his head from the desk and saw that the bodyguards were still in the same position. He was furious. Just as he was about to scold them, the cavalryman came again, forcing him to bury his head in his chest again. This repeated 3 times. It was the 1st Cavalry Division, the new army, and the Liaodong Cavalry Reinforced Regiment that passed by. This scared Rong Shao 3 times, but it also made him more courageous. Holding a sharp longsword in his hand, he stood up. He wanted to kill 1 or 2 of the bodyguards. He wanted to remind the others that he was the master. When there was danger, they should protect him and not just care about their own lives. Another rumbling sound rang out, but to Rong Shao, who had already experienced it 3 times, it no longer had any effect of intimidating him. However, just when he thought that the cavalry would pass by safely, the footsteps outside the tent were getting closer and closer. Then, the curtain of the tent was opened from the outside. The commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Lu Zhuo, walked in with a group of soldiers. They had also seen some tents here and had come to search them out of curiosity. As a new army that had guarded the city for several months and been trapped for more than a year, their combat strength had dropped a level due to the lack of nutrition. Yang Chendong took this into consideration and ordered them to stay and clean up the battlefield. It was the easiest job. The 1st Cavalry Division of the new army was in charge of capturing prisoners in this area. Originally, he thought that there would be no one in the tent since several cavalry units had passed by. However, he didn't expect to see more than 30 people when he entered the tent. One of them was even holding a sword and standing in the middle of the tent with an angry look on his face. "There is a tough guy here." Lu Zhuo sighed when he saw the person. As his voice fell, several bodyguards behind him rushed out and surrounded the person holding the sword. It seemed that if the other party dared to make a move, they would rush up and chop him into meat paste. The person holding the sword was Rong Shao. He wanted to teach those bodyguards a lesson and then force them to protect him and leave here. He did not expect that there would be cavalry who noticed this place and rushed in. When he saw those bodyguards surrounding him, he was scared and threw his sword on the ground. Then he knelt on the ground and shouted, "Sir, please spare me." He turned out to be a coward. This dramatic scene stunned Lu Zhuo. "Yes, I am a coward." In order to survive, Rong Shao, who was kneeling on the ground, forced himself to raise his head. He wanted to see who the other party was and whether they could be bribed. As long as they could let him live, he was willing to pay a lot of money. When he raised his head, he recognized Lu Zhuo. He immediately shouted, "Division Commander Lu, I am Rong Shao. You don't know me? I used to do business with the city lord's mansion in the first city." If he did not shout like this, Lu Zhuo might not recognize him. If he was captured as an ordinary prisoner, he might have a chance to escape. But now, his shout had completely exposed his identity. After Lu Zhuo heard the name Rong Shao, he frowned and asked, are you the Biming merchant Rongshao? Hearing Lu Zhuo call out his name and identity, Rongshao quickly raised his head and said, "Yes, Division Commander Lu, I am Rongshao. We have met before. I have even worked in the army." This time, Lu Zhuo looked carefully and recognized that the person in front of him was indeed Rongshao. He could not help but laugh and said, "Oh, it's really you. Come, get up quickly." As he spoke, he walked over and made a gesture of supporting him with both hands. Receiving such treatment, Rongshao's face was naturally filled with joy. He stood up with a smile on his face. But soon, this smile froze on his face because the next moment, a heavy punch hit his lower abdomen. With just one punch, he vomited all the food that he had just eaten. Rongshao's name could be said to be well known in the beginning city. Unfortunately, it was not a good reputation, but a bad reputation. It was this person who became Biming's lackey. He first persuaded Su Yuan and forced the entire new Second Army to surrender to Biming. For this matter, Commander Tiger's Mane had given a strict order that if one day they could catch Rongshao, they should not be polite to him. Lu Zhuo naturally remembered this in his heart. He thought that this person was still abusing his power in Shajing City. He never thought that he would meet him here. How could he be polite? Of course, he would teach him a lesson first. The miserable Rongshao was beaten up by Lu Zhuo on the spot. He knelt on the ground and vomited. He did not even have the strength to stand up. Lu Zhuo stopped and said to the soldiers beside him, "Come, lift him up and send him to Bugnam of Gojoseon for punishment." Without a leader, the 100,000 Biming army could not form an effective resistance. Even if some of the Biming army generals wanted to resist and make contributions, they could only resist for a few hours under the crazy attack of the 5-star army cavalry. In the end, they could not escape the fate of being surrounded and surrendered. Yang Chendong appeared at the gate of the first city with 1,000 black cavalry at noon. The first thing he saw was the captives of the Biming army and the money and supplies that they did not have time to transport when they escaped. "Young master, it's a big harvest." Beta Persei looked at all this with a grin. Yang Chendong was also in a good mood. He thought that with 70,000 Liaodong iron cavalry and 50,000 Walla elite cavalry, even if they won this battle, they would have to pay a certain price. He did not expect that Shiheng was so afraid of death that he escaped so quickly. This was naturally because of the previous strategies that worked, but it also had a lot to do with the incompetence of the commander of the Biming army. "Young master, young master." Not far away, a group of cavalry galloped over, and the shout could be heard clearly even though it was still far away. "It's Tiger's Head." Beta Persei had good eyesight and recognized the person who came. He was also excited. It had been more than 2 years since the last time they were separated. Anyone would be excited to see each other again. Especially Tiger's Mane, who came over on horseback, jumped off his horse when he was still more than 10 meters away from Yang Chendong and ran over. Facing this errand boy and servant who had accompanied him since he was a child, Yang Chendong was also filled with emotions, and his eyes involuntarily became gentle. "Young master, you're finally here." Tiger's Mane, who fell 10 feet in front of White Dragon, couldn't help but cry. "Quick, help Tiger's Head up." Yang Chendong couldn't stand to say this the most. He could see tens of thousands of soldiers fighting and even dying on the battlefield, but he just couldn't bear to see these men in tears. Beta Persei dismounted from his horse and helped Tiger's Mane, who was kneeling on the ground, up. Tiger's Mane, who seemed to have just calmed down, burst into tears again because of Yang Chendong's words, "You've worked hard." Unlike parting, Tiger's Mane was a person who would rather break than bend. He had even prepared to live and die with the first city. He also thought that he would never see the young master again in his life. At this time, seeing him again, one could imagine how excited he was. "Young master, you're becoming more and more mature and charming," Tiger's Mane couldn't help but say after looking up and sizing up Yang Chendong. When he first entered the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty, Yang Chendong was only a young man who was less than 20 years old. But now, he was nearly 30 years old and was a mature middle-aged man. Even the corners of his mouth had grown a beard. How could people not be moved? "Ha, tiger's mane, your flattery skills have also improved." With Yang Chendong's laughter, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly became much more cheerful. After Tiger's Mane, Yang Si, Yuan, and the others came to greet him one by one. Yang Chendong gave each of them verbal encouragement, making them feel the warmth and importance of being close to them. After everyone greeted each other, they talked about the current situation of the battle. Tiger's Mane took the initiative to report, "Young master, except for more than 10,000 people who died or were injured in battle, the rest of the 100,000 Baiming army surrendered and were captured. Among them, the commander-in-chief, Rong Xiao, was also captured alive by us. You can do whatever you want with him." "Very good." Yang Chendong nodded happily. "This battle is much smoother than I thought. Everyone has put in a lot of effort and should be rewarded." "Heh heh heh." Everyone chuckled when they heard this. However, only one person had a straight face. When he saw that Yang Chendong seemed to be in a good mood, he suddenly stepped forward and said, "King, I don't want to be rewarded. I only request to participate in the hunting mission. Please allow it." The person who spoke was the commander of the new light cavalry, Ma Xiangshan. It was obvious that he was still angry about being stopped by the Liaodong cavalry. This time, he wanted to take revenge. When Ma Xiangshan first met Yang Chendong, they were still at High Town. At that time, he had shown his strength and questioned Yang Chendong's horsemanship. In the end, it ended with the white dragon being subdued. After not seeing each other for many years, the moment he opened his mouth, it was as if he was in a difficult position. Tiger's Mane, Yang Si, Yuan, and the others were all shocked and angrily rebuked him. Today, Yang Chendong was no longer the Yang Chendong of High Town. He was now the Bugnam of Gojoseon. The territory he had was comparable to the Great Ming Dynasty, and the number of troops he had was enough to dominate the Great Ming Dynasty. How could he allow others to question the military plans he made? If Yang Chendong became angry and punished Ma Xiangshan, no one would be able to say anything. Chapter 1184. Commander Ma, what are you doing? Hurry up and apologize to the king. Tiger's Mane was the first to speak. It was clear that he still cared for and valued this person. Commander Ma, hurry up and apologize. Yuan, Yang Si, and the others also spoke up. Lu Zhua and the others, who felt that they had lost face, also hurriedly winked at Ma Xiangshan, reminding him within the appropriate range. Seeing that everyone was reprimanding him and showing concern for him, Ma Xiangshan realized that he had caused trouble. Yang Chendong was not Tiger's Mane, who could voice out his opinions in person. He immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Yang Chendong. "King, please forgive this subordinate's reckless words. Young master, you see, Ma Xiangshan's temper is like this. He speaks without thinking. In fact, he doesn't mean anything else, and he doesn't mean to question your decision. Please forgive his reckless behavior." Yes, Commander Ma is usually a good person. He is loyal and reliable, and does things seriously. Yang Si is willing to vouch for him. He did not mean to be disrespectful. Yang Si also spoke up at this moment, and his knees went soft as he knelt on the ground. The originally happy and harmonious scene instantly became like this. Everyone didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Yang Chendong's expression did not change, but he lamented in his heart. In the past, he always heard people say that it was lonely at the top and that an emperor would not have any friends. He never believed it. However, everything that happened in front of him vividly taught him a lesson. It made him understand that now everyone was actively keeping a distance from him. This might be a show of respect. However, from now on, it would not be so easy for him to be friends with these people and hear some truth. Young master, look. Seeing that Yang Chendong did not speak for a long time and even his brother Yang Si was kneeling on the ground to plead for Ma Xiongxian, Beta Persei finally could not hold it in anymore. He asked tentatively in a low voice with a pleading expression on his face. Puchi. When Yang Chendong saw Beta Persei's reaction, he finally could not help but laugh out loud. He then pointed at the crowd and said, "What are you doing? What are you all doing? Do you really think that just because I, the young master, am in a higher position, will become estranged?" Commander Ma only gave a suggestion. He didn't do anything. Why should I punish him? Why don't you all get up? Yang Chendong said with a smile on his face. Obviously, he was not angry. Tiger's man and the others let out a sigh of relief, but at the same time, they did not deliberately remind Ma Xiongxian to thank him. Ma Xiongxian was very clear that his actions just now were very uncomfortable. This time, his apology was sincere. Your Majesty, it's all my fault. I didn't think before speaking. Thank you for your forgiveness. Well, it's not a big deal. Besides, Commander Ma gave a military suggestion. This is what a military officer should do. There's nothing wrong with it. Not to mention, it's very reasonable. We sent too few cavalry to chase after them. Since the new army is made up of cavalry, of course, they should perform better. Not only was Yang Chendong not angry, but he also took the initiative to say what everyone wanted to say. For a moment, everyone's eyes gathered on him again. According to the military action plan that Yang Chendong had previously set, considering that the new army had been fighting for so many days, once the battle started and they broke through the joint defense line of the Baiming army and the Walla army, what they had to do was to capture prisoners and clean up the battlefield. Relatively speaking, this task was the easiest and safest. It was also beneficial for the new army to quickly recover their strength. But now, the Baiming army's front line was broken through so easily. This was really beyond Yang Chendong's expectations. Because of this, some changes could be made to the previous military plan. Noticing that everyone was looking at him with hopeful eyes, Yang Chendong asked seriously, after being besieged for so long, and with the lack of food, "Are you sure that your strength hasn't declined and you can participate in the next tough battle?" "No problem." In just an instant, all the division-level generals of the new army spoke in unison. Ignoring everyone's answer, Yang Chendong's eyes fell on Tiger's mane. He wanted to hear his opinion. He didn't want to blindly agree because these people wanted to show off. Once there was a problem, it would be a big problem. Tiger's mane obviously understood what Yang Chendong meant. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he lowered his head and pondered for a moment. Then, he raised his head and said, "Young master, most of them don't have any problems. Although the siege seems dangerous, as cavalry, they don't really have many opportunities to go up the city tower. In addition, Yang Si took out the stored food half a month ago. During this period of time, everyone's physical strength has been replenished. They can accept the mission of continuous battle." "Well, you said that most of them don't have any problems. That means that some of them have problems. Tell me, which divisions need to stay behind?" Yang Chendong understood the hidden meaning in Tiger's mane's words. He also needed someone to stay behind to clean up the battlefield and look after the prisoners. He couldn't let the new army rush up at once. If that happened, what would happen to the safety of the beginning city? "Yes, young master. I personally think that the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division should stay behind. The other divisions can join the battle immediately." Tiger's mane didn't even turn his head. He could even imagine that his subordinates would definitely look at him with hopeful gazes. However, it was good to want to render meritorious service. However, if they didn't have enough strength and forcefully stood out, it wouldn't be meritorious service but courting death. When he mentioned the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division, Lu Zhuo and Deng Yu's expressions immediately became very ugly. However, they had nothing to say. Previously, when they were defending the city, the 70,000 soldiers that Yang Si had prepared couldn't hold on any longer. The 2 divisions even abandoned their horses and rushed up the city tower. Only then did they protect the city. Because of this, their losses weren't small. Now, it was most appropriate for them to stay behind to defend the city and look after the prisoners. After Tiger's Mane finished speaking, no one objected. Yang Qindong knew that this should be a result that everyone could accept. He immediately said, "Very good. If that's the case, the 1st Cavalry Division and the 2nd Cavalry Division will stay behind. Heavy Cavalry Regiment, listen to my orders. You are ordered to wander around Tulu City. If you find any Baiming army that wants to come out, fight them back. If there are too many enemy soldiers, you can return to the beginning city at any time to ask for reinforcements." Yes. The Heavy Cavalry Regiment's commander, Windchaser, immediately agreed excitedly. Light Cavalry Regiment and Reconnaissance Regiment, rest for a while. After that, you will set off with this king and kill your way to the Hanoi area. This time, we will make the Wara pay the price. I want Yeshen's head. Yang Qindong's voice became louder and louder as he spoke. The 2 commanders, Ma Xiong-shan and Ding Shan, immediately agreed loudly. As the war went surprisingly smoothly, Yang Qindong's vision was no longer limited to taking back the lost cities. Instead, he wanted to make a crusade against his enemies and opponents. And this time, his target was the leader of the Wara, Yeshen. Although Baiming was also an opponent, after all, they had a deep foundation and were powerful. If he tangled with them now, he didn't know how many troops and time he would have to invest. This was not in line with Yang Qindong's current development goal. It was better to let go of the opponent first and clench his fists to deal with Yeshen first. Of course, if Baiming didn't know what was good for them and still came out to mess things up, then he didn't mind fighting a few more battles with them. The new army's military plan had been adjusted. Everyone went to prepare. Using these few hours of reorganization, Yang Qindong came to the big tent outside the city. He separately received the Far Eastern Army's commander Chen Bo, Mabei Division's commander Xian Honghai, Na Raizong, and the Mongolian generals who had joined the 5-star army. During the process of receiving them, Yang Qindong gave full recognition and praise to everyone's performance, making every general feel a sense of importance. When everyone walked out of the tent, their faces were full of satisfaction and excitement. Especially at the end, when Yang Qindong sacrificed himself to analyze the situation for them, it made them have a clearer understanding of the next step and plan. For example, the Far Eastern Army's commander Chen Bo, Yang Qindong straightforwardly asked him to rush back to the Far Eastern province. The environment there was complicated, and they couldn't lack the deterrence of the army. Of course, this time, they didn't come in vain. After the supply line was opened, soon new supplies would be sent from the sea through the Liaodong region. This time, when Chen Bo and the others returned, they could send a large number of logistical supplies back. This would play a very positive role in speeding up the development of the Far Eastern province. 6th Young Master, I will leave you a division. Next, we will deal with Yeshen of the Wara. He is not an easy person to deal with. Of course, the more the better. I also want to let my soldiers see the true style of the 5-star Army's cavalry. Chen Bo was in favor of withdrawing the army back to the Far Eastern province. Originally, this time, he came here to launch a surprise attack and rescue the heavily injured Mo Bay City and Shur City. Now that the mission was completed, of course, he had to go back. However, he still hoped to leave a division behind so that they could learn more from Yang Qindong. In the face of Chen Bo's request, Yang Qindong thought about it for a while and agreed. No matter what, he was still the commander of an army. Moreover, he stayed in that bitter cold place all year round. If he made a request, he would have to fulfill it. After Chen Bo left a division behind, Narisong was also allowed to bring 20,000 Mongolian cavalry to participate in the next battle. Yang Chendong only had one request for him, and that was to follow orders. Since those small Mongolian tribes wanted to have a share of the pie in the war, they must obey orders and follow orders. If they couldn't do this, then they should leave as soon as possible. Now, Yang Xie didn't have to rely on these small Mongolian tribes. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.